Chapter 6:16. Wang Fong was worried that Gu Lingyao would not be able to think things through and do something extreme. If that happened, it would be even more troublesome. Hence, she spoke up to console him. Hearing Wang Fong's words, Gu Lingyao replied expressionlessly, "Don't worry, I won't do anything stupid. I'm a little tired and want to go back and rest." After speaking, Gu Lingyao turned around and left. Seeing this, Wang Fong was worried about Gu Lingyao. She hurriedly bid farewell to Wang Zong and hurriedly chased after him. "If anything happens to Xiaoqin, I won't let you off the hook," Yi Futian said. These were the words that Wang Fong said to Wang Zong before she left. Her meaning was very clear. No matter what Wang Zong did, he had to rescue Xiaoqin. Seeing Wang Fong hurriedly chasing after Gu Lingyao, Wang Zong wanted to cry but had no tears. What was going on? He did not know that he had asked Xiaoqin to kill He Chushuan. Why was he responsible for Xiaoqin being taken away by the law enforcement hall? Furthermore, the person that Xiaoqin killed was a direct disciple. It was easier said than done to rescue him. When he thought of the perverted old man in charge of the law enforcement hall, Wang Zong felt a chill run down his spine. In Wang Zong's opinion, rescuing someone from the hands of that perverted old man was no different from snatching food from a tiger's mouth. Sigh, what sin have I committed to have such a sister? Sigh, the heavens are unfair, the heavens are unfair. After a series of sighs, Wang Zong lowered his head and left with a gloomy expression. He had to think of a way to rescue Xiaoqin. Accompanied by Wang Fong, Gu Lingyao returned to his residence. However, once he returned, Gu Lingyao locked himself in his room and ignored Wang Fong. Because of that, Wang Fong didn't dare to leave, so she could only stay at Gu Lingyao's place. However, Wang Fong worried too much. Gu Lingyao knew that it wasn't the right time to add fuel to the fire, so he didn't do anything drastic. Instead, he told his father, Gu Qi, about it and hoped that he could come up with a solution. Wang Zong and Gu Lingyao were thinking of ways to help Xiaoqin. At the same time, Xiaoqin followed the 8 deacons to the Tianfeng Xingzong Law Enforcement Hall. Unlike other places in Tianfeng Xingzong, there was no one around except for the people who belonged to the Law Enforcement Hall. It seemed a little cold and desolate. However, this was also very normal. After all, what kind of place was the Law Enforcement Hall? Who would run here all day long? It could be said that the Law Enforcement Hall was the most deserted place in Tianfeng Xingzong. Under the guidance of several deacons, Xiaoqin walked all the way to the Law Enforcement Hall. The layout of the Law Enforcement Hall was very simple. It was a small courtyard, and the walls and door were painted with black paint. There were only 2 colors in the Law Enforcement Hall. One was black, and the other was red. At the same time, he didn't know if it was because this place had been deserted for many years, but when he walked into the Law Enforcement Hall, a chilly wind blew against his face, giving him a chilling feeling. Cold, grim, and solemn. This was the feeling that the Law Enforcement Hall gave Xiaoqin. After passing through the front yard, Xiaoqin quickly arrived at the Law Enforcement Hall's main hall. At the end of the hall, there was a wooden armchair. On the wall behind it, there were the words, Justice, Strict, and Ming. However, these words were written in red paint, and looked a little scary. When Xiaoqin arrived at the center of the hall, the 8 deacons who were responsible for escorting Xiaoqin consciously separated into 2 sides and stood proudly. At the same time, an old man in a black robe appeared on the empty wooden armchair. The old man's face was thin and full of wrinkles, but his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. There was no expression on his face, as if he was a dead man. Facing this old man, Xiaoqin's first feeling was coldness. This old man was too cold. Whether it was his appearance or his aura, it gave people the feeling that they had fallen into an ice cellar. The old man's name was Yan Xing, and he was the head elder of the Law Enforcement Hall. He was in charge of all punishments in Tianfeng Xingzong. It was no exaggeration to say that Yan Xing was the demon in the hearts of all Tianfeng Xingzong disciples. If one were to ask who they were most afraid of in Tianfeng Xingzong, Yan Xing would definitely be the number one. Without a doubt, even the two Tianfeng saints couldn't compare to him. Yan Xing looked at Xiao Chen expressionlessly. After a long silence, he finally opened his mouth to speak. However, his voice was like the sound of metal rubbing against each other. It was sharp and hoarse, and it made people feel uncomfortable. Xiao Chen, do you know your crime? To be honest, facing Yan Xing, Xiao Chen felt a lot of pressure. It was even greater than facing the Tianfeng saint. Of course, this didn't mean that Yan Xing was stronger than the Tianfeng saint. Yan Xing was only a half-step saint. In terms of strength, he was naturally weaker than the Tianfeng saint. However, the feeling he gave off was completely different from the Tianfeng saint. This was where Xiao Chen's pressure came from. Resisting the pressure from Yan Xing, Xiao Chen replied in a low voice, "I don't know what crime I have committed." "How dare you? You killed a direct disciple of Glory Sect in public. Isn't that a serious crime?" Hearing Xiao Chen's reply, Yan Xing shouted in a low voice. Following his shout, an extremely cold aura emanated from Yan Xing's body. It was as if he could send people into hell. The pressure on him increased once more. Gritting his teeth, Xiao Chen braced himself and said, "I've heard that Glory Sect's law enforcement hall is strict and just. But why didn't Elder ask about the cause and effect of the matter before deciding that I have committed a crime?" Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yan Xing retracted his aura and asked, "All right, I'll give you a chance. Tell me what happened." Although Yan Xing gave off a fierce and cold aura, those who were familiar with him knew that he was definitely a strict and just person. It was because of this that the Tianfeng saint allowed him to be in charge of Glory Sect's law enforcement. He had the power to decide life and death. Hearing Yan Xing's words, Xiao Chen recounted the entire incident truthfully. He did not exaggerate or hide anything. After hearing Xiao Chen's story, Yan Xing's expression softened. At least when he looked at Xiao Chen, he no longer had that cold look from before. Originally, Xiao Chen killing He Chushuan should have been a death sentence in Yan Xing's eyes. But after hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yan Xing asked himself if He Chushuan deserved to die for doing such a thing. It was understandable, and He Chushuan deserved to die. But no matter what, Xiao Chen had violated the rules of the sect by killing someone. It was impossible for Yan Xing to let him go just like that. Looking at Xiao Chen expressionlessly, Yan Xing was thinking about how to punish Xiao Chen. Originally, Xiao Chen should have been sentenced to death. But now that Xiao Chen was a rare genius, killing him would be a loss to Glory Sect. Just as Yan Xing was thinking about how to punish him, He Feng's figure appeared in the main hall. Looking at Yan Xing, He Feng smiled and said, "Old man Yan, you can't kill Xiao Chen. Tomorrow I'll release 10 chapters. Consider it as making up for the 6 chapters that I owe. It's not easy to save up chapters. But since I'm out here, I'll have to pay it back. Starting tomorrow at 12 noon. Brothers, please support me. Thank you." Chapter 6:17. He Feng appeared out of nowhere and said that Xiao Chen couldn't be killed. Hearing this, Yan Xing said expressionlessly, "Great Elder, are you here to plead for Xiao Chen?" In terms of status, He Feng was higher than Yan Xing. After all, He Feng was the Great Elder of Tianfeng Xingzong, the most powerful person under the Tianfeng Saint. Normally, the Tianfeng Saint wouldn't care about anything. It was He Feng who was in charge of all the affairs of the sect. Facing He Feng, who had a higher status than him and was very familiar with him, Yan Xing didn't give him any face at all. He even changed the way he addressed He Feng. Normally, He Feng would call Yan Xing Old Man Yan, and Yan Xing would call He Feng Old Man He. But now, Yan Xing was calling He Feng Old Man He. It was obvious that Yan Xing wasn't happy about it. Xiao Chen had indeed violated the rules of the sect, which was something that Yan Xing could not deny. Since Xiao Chen had made a mistake, he should be punished. However, it was Yan Xing's way of doing things, and no one could plead for mercy on his behalf. Therefore, Yan Xing said unhappily after hearing He Feng's words. Knowing that Yan Xing was unhappy that he was pleading for Xiao Chen, He Feng didn't mind at all. I say, old man Yan, I've already asked for mercy. Are you not going to give me any face? He Feng didn't deny that he was pleading for mercy for Xiao Chen. Instead, he admitted it openly. Hearing this, Yan Xing's eyes flashed with coldness. Great Elder, this is not a matter of face. If everyone comes to me to ask for face in the future, then my law enforcement hall will no longer exist. Since they have violated the rules of the sect, it will be useless for anyone to plead for leniency. Facing He Feng's pleading, Yan Xing didn't buy it. In Tianfeng Xingzong, Yan Xing was famous for his stubbornness. No one could change his mind once he decided on something, except for the Tianfeng saint. It was because of his stubbornness and selflessness that the disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong were so afraid of the disciplinary hall that he led. Because once you entered this place, as long as you made a mistake, no matter what your status was, you would be punished. In the past, Wang Zong had also fallen into the hands of a harsh punishment. Back then, Wang Zong was caught stealing wine from Glory Sect and was sent to the Law Enforcement Hall. Many elders came to plead on Wang Zong's behalf, but it was useless. In the end, Wang Zong was locked up in Black Wind Stream for an entire year. It was also because of that experience that Wang Zong became quite fearful of this old man, Yan Xing. It couldn't be helped. This old man was too stubborn. He had only secretly drunk some wine and was actually locked up in the Black Wind Stream. He Feng bluntly rejected He Feng. Seeing this, He Feng smiled and said, I say, old man Yan, you're already so old, why are you still so stubborn? How about this, I have 2 jars of good wine, your favorite fire cloud wine. I'll give them to you, how about it? Since he couldn't save face, He Feng started to bribe him. Everyone who knew Yan Xing well knew that this stubborn old man loved to drink, especially good wine. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he loved wine as much as his life. If it were any other time, Yan Xing would definitely be overjoyed if He Feng gave 2 jars of Firecloud wine to him. But now, Yan Xing didn't hesitate at all in the face of He Feng's temptations. He Feng, who do you think I am? Say no more. Xiao Chen violated the rules of the sect. Although there was a reason for it, it was still a fact that he killed He Chushuan. He can escape death, but he can't escape punishment. As punishment, Xiao Chen will be locked up in Black Wind Stream for 100 years. It was obvious that Yan Xing was really angry. After calling out He Feng's name and scolding him, he immediately announced Xiao Chen's punishment. Although being locked up in Black Wind Stream for 100 years saved his life, it was undeniable that Xiao Chen was basically crippled. Thinking about it, 100 years of emptiness was unbearable for any young cultivator. After 100 years, when Xiao Chen regained his freedom, those of the same generation as him would have already surpassed him. Moreover, 100 years of emptiness was enough to deplete most of Xiao Chen's talent, turning him into a cripple. Seeing that Yan Xing directly announced Xiao Chen's punishment, He Feng didn't change his expression at all. He wasn't nervous, and he still had a smile on his face. I say, old man Yan, aren't you too cruel? 100 years in Black Wind Stream? Are you trying to completely end Xiao Chen's life? Hearing He Feng's words, Yan Xing said coldly, he killed someone. I'm already being merciful by sparing his life. He Feng, you don't have to say any more. Even if you are the great elder, this is the law enforcement hall. I have the final say. Men, take Xiao Chen away. Immediately, 2 deacons of the law enforcement hall stepped forward and prepared to take Xiao Chen away. Seeing this, He Feng suddenly shouted. Wait. Now that things had gotten to this point, He Feng still wanted to stop them. This completely infuriated Yan Xing. He slammed the remaining armchair and stood up. The armchair shattered, and a terrifying cold aura emanated from his body. He glared at He Feng angrily. He Feng, I'll say it again. This is the law enforcement hall. If you still want to stop me, don't blame me for being merciless. Yan Xing was truly enraged, but He Feng still had a smile on his face. Xiao Chen, who was standing at the side, found it strange as well. In fact, Xiao Chen had been thinking about how to deal with the situation ever since Yan Xing announced his punishment. After all, Xiao Chen could not afford to waste 100 years. He Feng said with a smile, not changing his expression because of Yan Xing's anger. What, old man Yan, do you still want to fight with me? Come at me. Do you think I'm afraid of you? No matter who begs for mercy today, Yan Xing, won't listen, Yan Xing said. Yan Xing was really stubborn and didn't know how to be flexible. To him, wrong was wrong and right was right. Hearing Yan Xing's words, the smile on He Feng's face became even brighter. He then took out a golden token from his storage ring and said to Yan Xing with a faint smile, "What if the Lord Sacred Master comes? Don't tell me you won't listen? The Lord Sacred Master is different, but why would the Lord Sacred Master? If the Tianfeng Saint came to plead for mercy, it would be different, but why would the Tianfeng Saint come?" Just as he was speaking, Yan Xing saw the token in He Feng's hand. His expression changed and his voice came to an abrupt halt. The Heavenly Wind Holy Insignia was the identity insignia of the Heavenly Wind Saint. Seeing the insignia was equivalent to seeing the Heavenly Wind Saint himself. Yan Xing was stunned. Seeing this, He Feng laughed evilly, as if his evil plan had worked. He then looked serious and raised the Heavenly Wind Holy Insignia high up in the air. Elder of the Law Enforcement Hall, Yan Xing, listen to my orders. Following He Feng's words, Yan Xing put his hands together and bowed respectfully. Yan Xing is here to listen to the Lord Sacred Master's orders. First update, brothers, please support me. Please collect me, please vote me, please recommend me. End of chapter. Chapter 6:18. Yan Xing was really a stubborn old man. He had an angry look on his face just now, but after seeing the Heavenly Wind Sacred Badge, he immediately bowed respectfully. Looking at the respectful Yan Xing, He Feng's eyes flashed with pride, but he still said loudly, "Lord Saint's order is that He Chushuan is a despicable and narrow-minded person. He should not be a direct disciple of Glory Sect. Today, even though Xiao Chen killed He Chushuan, he was not punished. Instead, he is now the 10th direct disciple of Glory Sect and will be given the Heavenly Wind Robe." He Feng shouted out Saint Tianfeng's command. Hearing this, Yan Xing respectfully replied. Seeing this, He Feng slowly put away the Heavenly Wind Saint decree. However, at that moment, Yan Xing suddenly threw a punch at He Feng. Facing Yan Xing's sudden attack, He Feng dodged to the side and shouted angrily, "Old man Yan, are you crazy?" He Feng did not expect Yan Xing to attack suddenly. Of course, he did not use his full strength, not even his spiritual energy. Facing He Feng's angry shout, Yan Xing pursed his lips and said, "I'm crazy? Old man don't you know what you did?" "Me? What did I do?" He Feng said. Don't give me that. You clearly have the Lord Saint's sacred badge, and you even pretended to plead for Xiao Chen. Are you making fun of me? Yan Xing said. The moment He Feng took out the Heavenly Wind sacred badge, Yan Xing knew that he had been tricked. He Feng was here under the Lord Saint's orders, but he did not show the badge. Damn it. Hearing this, He Feng laughed awkwardly. Haha, old man Yan, I was just joking with you. Haha, don't mind it, don't mind it. Give me your 2 jars of fire cloud wine, and I won't mind it. Otherwise, I'm not done with this. Yan Xing said coldly. Fire cloud wine. Hearing this, He Feng's expression changed slightly, and he cursed in his heart, "Old bastard, I knew you would want my 2 jars of fire cloud wine." The fire cloud wine was the best wine in the Sky Wind Palace, and it was produced in very small quantities. It was not something that could be bought with money. He Feng felt a little heartache, but after hesitating for a moment, he still chose to compromise. He took out 2 perfectly sealed jars of wine from his storage ring and handed them to Yan Xingdao. Here you go, old drunkard. Seeing the 2 jars of fire cloud wine flying toward him, Yan Xing's eyes flashed with joy. It was as if he had seen a peerless beauty and was afraid that someone would snatch it from him. He grabbed the 2 jars of wine and put them into his storage ring at lightning speed. Xiao Chen secretly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the 2 old men laughing and fooling around. It seemed like everything would be fine. However, he didn't expect that the Tianfeng saint would appear in the end. But this was also good. If the Tianfeng saint didn't appear, it would be troublesome for Xiao Chen if the Tianfeng saint didn't appear. Just now, although He Feng was teasing him, if it was not for the Sky Wind Saint token, Yan Xing would not have compromised. With the Tianfeng saint's verbal instruction, Xiao Chen was naturally fine. Not only was he fine, but he had also profited from his misfortune and become one of the top 10 personal disciples of the Tianfeng holy sect. It was like a carp leaping into the dragon. Who would have thought that things would end up like this? Seeing this, the 8 deacons in the hall looked at each other with a hint of relief in their eyes. Fortunately, they did not disrespect Xiao Chen and did not torture him. This way, Xiao Chen would not hold a grudge against them. The matter seemed to have ended perfectly. After the 2 old men quarreled with each other for a while, it finally ended with Yan Xing treating them to a drink. Then, the 2 old men's eyes fell on Xiao Chen at the same time. Yan Xing spoke first. Since the Lord has given the order, Xiao Chen, you may leave the law enforcement hall. However, if you dare to violate the sect rules in the future, I will not forgive you. Yan Xing indicated that Xiao Chen could leave, but He Feng stopped Xiao Chen in time. Wait. He asked Xiao Chen to wait. Hearing this, Xiao Chen looked at He Feng, waiting for him to continue. Facing Xiao Chen's gaze, He Feng purposely put on a stern face and walked slowly in front of Xiao Chen, seemingly angry. Little guy, what I said to you just now, you really didn't listen to a single word. He Feng scolded Xiao Chen. Hearing this, Xiao Chen suddenly remembered that He Feng had specifically reminded him before they left the lava river. Xiao Chen, remember one thing. The sect rules are not to be violated, and you are not to kill in public within the sect. Do you understand? However, Xiao Chen had completely forgotten about it. Facing such a situation, Xiao Chen was not in the mood to care about the sect rules. He smiled embarrassedly. After all, He Feng had already reminded him, but he did not take it seriously. It was indeed wrong of him to ignore it. Seeing Xiao Chen's embarrassed smile, He Feng snorted coldly. Humph, you still have the cheek to smile. Although the Lord has forgiven you this time, do you think that's the end? I have a mission for you. Let's make it clear that you cannot reject it. Consider it atonement. How about it, you have no objections? Xiao Chen did not know that He Feng had a mission for him. Other than being the great elder of Tianfeng Xingzong, He Feng was also in charge of the Hall of Missions in Glory Sect. He was in charge of all the missions and rewards in Tianfeng Xingzong. Forcefully giving Xiao Chen a mission, Xiao Chen did not reject it. After all, He Feng had treated him well, and had even helped him a lot this time. Since He Feng had a mission for him, Xiao Chen had no reason to reject it. He passed a memory stone to Xiao Chen. It contained all the information about the mission. This memory stone was actually similar to the skill imparting jade. However, compared to the skill imparting jade, this memory stone was cheaper. At the same time, the memory stone could store less information, and could only store simple text information. In the Heavenly Wind Sacred Sect, every mission was recorded in a memory stone. After a disciple accepted a mission, they would be able to obtain a memory stone related to the mission. Through the memory stone, they would be able to clearly and intuitively understand the mission's requirements, difficulty, danger, and so on. After receiving the memory stone, Xiao Chen bowed to He Feng. Seeing this, He Feng said in an annoyed tone, "Remember, this mission only requires you to succeed, not fail. Also, give me your identity token. After taking away Xiao Chen's identity token, He Feng handed a brand new one to Xiao Chen. This was the identity token of one of the top 10 pro-disciples. At the same time, a brand new Tianfeng robe was also handed to Xiao Chen. Second update, please bookmark, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 619. He Feng waved his hand and said after handing over the new identity token and the heavenly wind long robe to Xiao Chen. Go, the news of you being promoted to a direct disciple will be announced to the entire sect soon. But remember, you must complete the mission I gave you perfectly. Otherwise, you'll be in for a treat. Make the arrangements quickly and leave. Hearing He Feng's words, Xiao Chen bowed and said, Then, I'll take my leave. He Feng walked out of the disciplinary hall safe and sound. After Xiao Chen left, He Feng looked at Yan Xing excitedly and said, Old man Yan, let's go and have a drink. Old man, I worked so hard to get these 2 jars of Firecloud wine. Don't think you're keeping them for yourself. Yan Xing did not reject He Feng's eagerness to drink, but he still said with a serious face, Let's make things clear first. You can only drink 1 jar at most. The other jar is mine. Okay. Just 1 jar, okay? With that, He Feng pulled Yan Xing out of the disciplinary hall. Who knew where the 2 old men went to drink? The matter was resolved so easily. But on the way back, Xiao Chen suddenly realized that the Tianfeng saint might have been paying attention to this matter from the start. That was why He Feng was able to rush over in such a timely manner. In other words, from the start, killing He Chushuan would not be a problem. This was because the Tianfeng saint had given him permission to do so. Realizing this, Xiao Chen laughed self-deprecatingly. Seems like I'm worrying too much. Everything is under the Tianfeng saint's control. There was no need to worry about anything in the first place. Just as Xiao Chen was thinking about that, a bell suddenly rang from the top of Tianfeng's sacred mountain. The sound of the bell rang through every corner of the Tianfeng Saint Mountain. Hearing this sound, all the disciples and deacons of the Glory sect turned their attention to the peak of the mountain. All the disciples knew that the sound of the bell meant that something big was about to happen in the Glory sect. It could be a good thing, or it could be a bad thing. The sound of the bell reverberated through Tianfeng's sacred mountain. After a long while, it gradually dissipated. At the same time, a golden screen of light appeared at the peak of Tianfeng's sacred mountain. The screen of light emitted a faint golden light. The golden light screen seemed to connect the peak of the mountain to the sky. Slowly, a line of words appeared on the screen. First core disciple, Xiao Chen, is promoted to the 10th direct disciple. It was a simple sentence, but it was enough to send chills down the spines of all the disciples of Glory sect. Someone had been promoted to a disciple. Someone. Disciple. At the same time, Gu Lingyao, who was still locked in her room. Lingyao. Look. Quick. Of the... Lingyao. Looking at the direction Wang Fang was pointing at, Gu Lingyao covered her mouth in shock. She couldn't believe it. Wasn't Xiao Chen brought to the disciplinary hall? How did he become a direct disciple all of a sudden? And the 10th direct disciple? Didn't that mean that Xiao Chen had replaced He Chushuan's position? She couldn't believe the light screen hanging in the sky. Wang Fang said slowly, Xiao Chen has been promoted to the 10th direct disciple. Doesn't that mean he's fine now? Think about it. If the disciplinary hall wanted to punish Xiao Chen, why would they let him be the 10th direct disciple? Although she didn't know why, Wang Fang guessed that Xiao Chen should be fine now. Hearing this, Gu Lingyao was overjoyed. Her eyes reddened and she cried tears of joy. She was happy for Xiao Chen, not only because Xiao Chen had been promoted to the 10th direct disciple, but also because Xiao Chen was able to get out of danger. The 2 women were very excited. On the other side, in the area of the 10 direct disciples, Yuqing, Lian Su, Wang Zong, and the other direct disciples in Tianfeng Xingzong were all looking up at the light screen on the mountain peak. They were all shocked. This guy actually replaced He Chushuan's position. Yuqing said softly to himself. Replaced He Chushuan? That's good. In this way, the 10 direct disciples in Tianfeng Xingzong are worthy of their name. Lian Su said. I think I understand what the Lord is trying to say. Sigh, I've worried for nothing. No, I have to ask Shao Chen to treat me to a drink. Otherwise, I would be at a disadvantage. I've helped him so many times, so I have to ask him to treat me to a drink, Wang Zong said with a smirk. The replacement of the direct disciples shocked Tianfeng Xingzong. Every replacement of the direct disciples could be said to be a major event in Tianfeng Xingzong. After all, the 10 direct disciples not only represented the 10 strongest people of Tianfeng Xingzong's younger generation, but also represented the face and future of Tianfeng Xingzong. For example, in the competition with the Tianyue sacred sect and other surrounding sacred sects, the strength of the 10 direct disciples often represented the strength of Tianfeng Xingzong. After recovering from their initial shock, all of the disciples quickly realized a problem. The Iron Sword sect was likely going to suffer a calamity. Shao Chen replaced He Chushuan's position and became the 10th direct disciple. In this way, the Iron Sword sect would have one less direct disciple, while the Tianqi sect would have one more direct disciple. Secondly, there was a rumor that Yi Ting wasn't in Glory sect right now. Without Yi Ting holding the fort, what could Iron Sword sect use to fight against Tianqi sect? Judging from the Iron Sword sect's actions, the Tianqi sect would definitely not let the matter rest. They would definitely launch a crazy revenge. Haha, people of the Iron Sword sect, wash your butts and wait. A disciple of the Tianqi sect had already begun to laugh loudly. Not only that, but there were even disciples of the Tianqi sect who had begun to go out to look for the Iron Sword sect. In the ordinary disciple area, the disciples of the Tianqi sect went out in groups of 3 to 5. When they saw the disciples of the Iron Sword sect, they went up to them and beat them up without saying a word. Who asked you to be arrogant and show off? Beat them up. Beat them up. Without He Chushuan, the disciples of the Iron Sword sect naturally lost their momentum. They were no match for them at all. For a time, the ordinary disciple area was filled with battles between the disciples of the Tianqi sect and the Iron Sword sect. Of course, this time it was completely reversed. It was the disciples of the Tianqi sect who beat up the disciples of the Iron Sword sect. Third update, please bookmark, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 620. Shao Chen's promotion to the 10th direct disciple actually caused a series of chain reactions. The most obvious ones were naturally the Tianqi sect and the Iron Sword sect. The Iron Sword sect, which could have been said to be firmly suppressing the Celestial Equal sect, was now completely stunned. They had never imagined that He Chushuan would be kicked off his pedestal by Shao Chen in the blink of an eye, ending up dead and his Dao vanishing. Not only was Shao Chen not punished for openly killing one of the top 10 direct disciples, but he was also like a carp leaping over the dragon gate. This kind of result was unacceptable to the disciples of the Iron Sword sect. The situation had completely reversed. This time, it was the disciples of the Iron Sword sect who became the target of scorn. Of course, Shao Chen was unaware of this. At this moment, Shao Chen was walking all the way from the law enforcement hall. Just as he arrived at Gu Lingyao's residence, he saw the little girl standing at the entrance of the courtyard, looking expectantly at him. Seeing Shao Chen, Gu Lingyao directly threw herself into his arms and hugged Shao Chen tightly. Seeing this, Shao Chen smiled and said, "What's wrong? I've become a direct disciple. Why are you crying? Did someone bully you? Tell me, I'll teach him a lesson for you." Seeing Gu Lingyao's red eyes, Shao Chen deliberately made fun of her. However, just as his voice fell, a cold laugh sounded. "What if I say it's me? Is senior brother Shao Chen going to teach me a lesson too?" Hearing this, Xiao Chen saw Wang Fang with her arms crossed in front of her chest and a smile on her face. Seeing this, Xiao Chen smiled slightly. Haha, how would I dare? Junior sister Wang Fang is someone with a backer. I'm not a match for senior brother Wang Zong. Xiao Chen knew that Wang Fang was joking, and Wang Fang had helped her a lot, so she wasn't angry at all. She held Gu Lingyao's hand and walked into the small yard. Now that it was over, Xiao Chen was not only fine, but also benefited from the disaster. It was a happy ending. The worry in his heart dissipated, and Gu Lingyao quickly adjusted himself. He kept pestering Xiao Chen to wear the heavenly wind robe for him to see. The heavenly wind robe was a symbol of status and a symbol of a personal disciple. Xiao Chen couldn't stand the little girl's pestering, so he took out the heavenly wind robe from his storage ring and put it on. The pure white robe was very loose and extended all the way to her ankles. Looking at Xiao Chen, who was wearing the heavenly wind robe, Gu Lingyao's eyes were filled with stars. She said with a smile, "So beautiful." All right, isn't it just a heavenly wind robe? My brother has one too. Why don't you take a second look at it? Wang Fang said unhappily when she saw Gu Lingyao's expression. That's different. Xiao Chen looks better in the heavenly wind robe than other personal disciples. Gu Lingyao immediately retorted when she heard Wang Fang's word. In fact, the little girl wasn't exaggerating. The heavenly wind robe was a top-grade defensive heavenly weapon. When Xiao Chen wore it, his entire aura was enhanced. Gu Lingyao turned to look at Xiao Chen and said arrogantly, "In the future, you're not allowed to take off the heavenly wind robe. You have to wear it." "Why?" Xiao Chen said helplessly. "Because it looks good. Brother Xiao Chen wearing the heavenly wind robe is truly perfect," Gu Lingyao said with a smile. Gu Lingyao wasn't the only one who liked the way Xiao Chen looked in the heavenly wind robe. Wang Fang secretly glanced at Xiao Chen and said softly with a pout, "This guy does look better in the heavenly wind robe than my brother." Wang Fang's face blushed as she said that. Not knowing what Wang Fang was thinking, under Gu Lingyao's insistence, Xiao Chen could only nod his head and agree in the end. Originally, wearing the heavenly wind robe wasn't a big deal. Furthermore, the heavenly wind robe was extremely comfortable to wear. It didn't have much weight and at the same time, it had a certain defensive effect. It was very good and was indeed a treasure. That night, Xiao Chen stayed at Gu Lingyao's place to celebrate with the two girls. As for the night, he naturally had a good time with Gu Lingyao. The next morning, Xiao Chen woke up and smiled at Gu Lingyao, who was sleeping soundly like a kitten. Then, he got up and washed up. However, he didn't forget the task that He Feng gave him. Xiao Chen went to the stone bench in the courtyard and sat down. He took out the memory stone and inserted his spiritual energy into it. Instantly, a wave of information was transmitted to Xiao Chen's mind through his spiritual energy. It was as if the information was imprinted in his mind. Without even looking at it, Xiao Chen already knew the requirements of this task. It was a very convenient memory stone. However, after the information was extracted by Xiao Chen, the memory stone became useless and became an ordinary stone. Xiao Chen casually threw the memory stone away and closed his eyes to recall the information about this task in his mind. From the description of the task, this task was a rescue mission and was classified as an Earth task. Tianfeng Xingzong's tasks were divided into 3 levels: Heaven, Earth, and Human. Heaven tasks were the highest, human tasks were the lowest, and Earth tasks were the middle. According to the description of the task, there was a group of bandits hiding deep in the mountains in the south of Tianfeng Prefecture. They were called the Qingma Gang. This group of bandits was extremely cunning and basically operated deep in the mountains and forests. They overdid things like robbing houses and kidnapping people for ransom. This time, there were more than 10 Tianfeng Xingzong disciples who had accepted a guard mission. However, when they were massacring the south of Tianfeng Prefecture, they were intercepted by the Qingma Gang. Not only did they rob the disciples of their treasures and an extremely important member of the main family of Tianfeng Prefecture, they even detained the disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong. It was unknown whether these people were dead or alive, but the actions of the Qingma gang had clearly angered Tianfeng Xingzong. Therefore, the task clearly stated that this time, not only did they have to rescue the disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong and the main family member of the main family of Tianfeng Prefecture, they also had to eliminate the Qingma gang. Surrender was not accepted, and they had to be uprooted. Secondly, for the rescue targets, regardless of whether they were alive or dead, their bodies had to be found. Xiao Chun slowly opened his eyes after he had basically grasped the situation of the mission. A faint smile appeared on his face as he said, "A rescue and annihilation mission in one? But this Qingma gang is really daring. They even dared to kidnap the disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong. Looks like Glory Sect is determined to eliminate these bandits this time. But how do I find their base?" The task description only gave a general area. According to the known clues, the Qingma gang's base should be in this area. However, the exact location could not be determined. Therefore, Xiao Chun had to think of a way to find the Qingma gang's base. Only then could he proceed with the next step of the operation. Fourth update, please bookmark, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 621. After learning about the mission, while Xiao Chun was deep in thought, Gu Lingyao had woken up. She stood gracefully in front of Xiao Chun and spoke with a smile on her face. "Big brother Xiao Chun, what are you thinking about?" Ever since she had confirmed her relationship with Xiao Chun, Gu Lingyao had returned to her usual mischievous self. Whenever she addressed Xiao Chun, she would always add the word "big brother" behind it. Her eyes were like crescent moons as she smiled. She was very adorable. Xiao Chun also smiled when he saw Gu Lingyao. He reached out and pulled the little girl into his arms. They hugged on a stone bench in the courtyard. Xiao Chun smiled and said, "It's because of the mission that the Great Elder gave me." He had already told Gu Lingyao about the mission that the Great Elder gave him yesterday. When she heard this, Gu Lingyao smiled and said, "I want to go too." When she knew that Xiao Chun was going to go out on a mission, Gu Lingyao insisted on going with him. Xiao Chun did not reject her. After all, the little girl was quite strong and should have no problem protecting herself. Moreover, after reading the mission description, Xiao Chun also knew that the strongest person in the Qingma gang was only at the Dao validation perfection stage. It should not be a big problem. Xiao Chun nodded with a smile. Seeing that Xiao Chun had agreed, Gu Lingyao immediately jumped up in joy. He did not intend to waste any time. Moreover, He Feng had said that it was best to complete the mission as soon as possible. Therefore, after cuddling with Gu Lingyao for a while, Xiao Chun prepared to leave. However, before he left, Xiao Chun made a trip back to his residence. Because he had been promoted to the 10th prodisciple, Xiao Chun's residence naturally had to be moved from the first core disciple's residence to the 10th prodisciple's residence. After rejecting the new maids that Glory Sect had assigned, Xiao Chun chose the 4 maids who were in charge of serving him previously. He brought them to the prodisciple's residence. After accepting He Chushuan's residence, Xiao Chun left the rest of the matters to the 4 girls. He then brought Gu Lingyao and left Tianfeng Xingzong. The 4 girls were naturally grateful to Xiao Chun for his actions. One must know that the maids of the prodisciples were carefully selected. Not only their looks, but their talents were also strict. However, Xiao Chun rejected them and still chose them. It could be said that the 4 girls had followed Xiao Chun's lead this time. After all, the maids of the prodisciples had the same status as the ordinary disciples of Glory Sect. Moreover, due to their special status, even the core disciples would not dare to show any disrespect to the maids of the prodisciples. After all, they were the trusted aides of the prodisciples. They were extremely touched. At the same time, the 4 girls could be said to have completely given themselves to Xiao Chun. In this lifetime, they would probably never betray Xiao Chun. Unaware of the thoughts of the four girls, Xiao Qin and Gu Lingyao had already arrived at Tianfeng Prefecture through the teleportation portal. Perhaps it was because she had been cooped up in Tianfeng Xingzong for too long, but the moment she came out, Gu Lingyao was like a little bird that had just been released from its cage. She jumped up and down happily and was curious about everything. Xiao Chengij, what is this? It looks delicious. Xiao Chengij, what do you think of this wooden comb? Along the way, Gu Lingyao was shopping here and there. She liked this and that and wanted to eat that. Looking at her, Xiao Qin felt both helpless and happy. Following behind Gu Lingyao leisurely, Xiao Chen's lips curled into a faint smile as he watched this little girl happily picking out her favorite things. He thought to himself, is this the feeling of being with the person you like? If only Shui Rou and Baihua were here too, then it would be perfect. He could not help but think of Qin Shuru and Baihua Fairy. He wondered where they were now and how they were doing. He had never given up on looking for them, but to no avail. The two of them walked leisurely. However, along the way, Xiao Chen could be said to be the center of attention, not for anything else but because of the Tianfeng robe that Xiao Chen was wearing. Sage Sek's personal disciple. Oh my god, I actually saw Tianfeng Xingzong's personal disciple. He's so handsome. Is this Tianfeng Xingzong's personal disciple? It would be great if I could talk to him. Ah, he's looking at me. He's looking at me. The surrounding people could not help but lock their eyes on Xiao Chen, especially some of the young ladies. They looked at Xiao Chen with infatuation. Sometimes, Xiao Chen's casual glance was enough to make these young ladies excited. Sensing the way these young ladies looked at Xiao Chen, Gu Lingyao could not care less about strolling around. She pouted and walked to Xiao Chen's side with a jealous look. She unceremoniously held on to Xiao Chen's arm, as if declaring her sovereignty, telling everyone that Xiao Chen was hers. Almost being pulled away by this little girl, Gu Lingyao, Xiao Chen looked at her pouting and said with a smile, "What's wrong, little girl? Are you jealous?" Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Gu Lingyao stubbornly raised her head and said with a look of dissatisfaction, "Who's jealous? I'm not jealous." Completely amused by Gu Lingyao's look, Xiao Chen gently patted Gu Lingyao's head and said with a smile, "How about I take off my Tianfeng robe?" "No." Hearing this, Gu Lingyao rejected without hesitation. "Why? No reason. Anyway, no way. You promised me, so you can't go back on your word." Wearing the Tianfeng robe, Xiao Chen would naturally be the center of attention wherever he went. However, Gu Lingyao did not want to let Xiao Chen take it off. She liked to see how Xiao Chen looked in the robe. Moreover, those young ladies were looking at Xiao Chen with infatuation, which made Gu Lingyao feel jealous, but also a little proud and secretly jealous. Who said that only men wanted their women to be devastatingly beautiful? Women also wanted their men to be heroes in the limelight. Under the envious and jealous gazes of those young ladies, holding Xiao Chen's arm, Gu Lingyao thought to herself, "It felt really good. She would rather die than let Xiao Chen take off his Tianfeng robe." In this regard, Xiao Chen could only nod helplessly and agree. After strolling around Tianfeng Prefecture for more than 2 hours, the two of them finally arrived at a transmission formation in the southern part of Tianfeng Prefecture, called Southern Border City. The whole Tianfeng Prefecture was divided into 2 parts, the north and the south. Southern Border City was the main city in the south, which was directly under the jurisdiction of Tianfeng Xingzong. Of course, there were many sects and empires in the south, but these sects and empires all submitted to Tianfeng Xingzong. Let's go. We've already wasted a lot of time. We have to finish this task quickly. Otherwise, I'm afraid the Great Elder will swallow me alive. Xiao Chen patted the back of Gu Lingyao's head and said with a smile. After strolling around Tianfeng Prefecture for more than 2 hours with the little girl, it was time to go to the south. 5th update, please bookmark, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 622. He led Gu Lingyao to the transmission formation. Seeing Xiao Chen coming, several disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong, who were in charge of guarding the transmission formation, hurried over and saluted him respectfully. "Greetings, senior brother." These disciples didn't know Xiao Chen's name, but the fact that he was wearing a Tianfeng robe indicated that Xiao Chen was a direct disciple. There was no doubt that someone would use the identity of a direct disciple, because it was a capital offense. They saluted Xiao Chen respectfully. Seeing this, Xiao Chen smiled and said, "We're going to southern border city. Thank you." "You're welcome, senior brother. Please wait a moment while we activate the transmission formation," one of the disciples replied respectfully. Soon, the transmission formation to southern border city was activated for Xiao Chen. As a beam of light shot up into the sky, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao disappeared into the transmission formation. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao had arrived at southern border city from Tianfeng Prefecture City. When they walked out of the transmission formation, there were already disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong waiting for them. They were also very respectful. They personally led Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao to the carriage and headed for the governor's mansion of southern border city. As a city directly under Tianfeng Xingzong, the governor's mansion naturally belonged to Tianfeng Xingzong. Meanwhile, the people in charge of southern border city were also disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong. Within Tianfeng Xingzong, ordinary disciples would rotate to guard different places every year. Usually, they would guard several cities directly under Tianfeng Xingzong. As the largest city in the south of Tianfeng Prefecture City, southern border city was also very prosperous. However, it was not as prosperous as Tianfeng Prefecture City. In terms of prosperity and size, it was not as prosperous as Tianfeng Xingzong. They went all the way to the governor's mansion of southern border city. There, Xiao Chen met the governor, who was also an elder of Tianfeng Xingzong. He guarded southern border city all year round and was a half-saint. In the hall of the governor's mansion, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao bowed to the governor and said, "Disciple Xiao Chen greets Elder Nangong." The elder was middle-aged and looked gentle and cultured. His name was Nangong Yi. Facing Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao's bow, Nangong Yi personally helped Xiao Chen up and said with a smile, "Xiao Chen's too polite." "Xiao Chen, you're too polite. I've heard a thing or two about you. Not bad, you're indeed a young hero. With you, the 10 direct disciples of the sage sect are finally gathered." His attitude towards Xiao Chen was very friendly. This was normal. After all, although Nangong Yi was an elder of sage sect, he was an expatriate elder. In terms of status, he was not much different from a pro-disciple like Xiao Chen. It could even be said that sage sect valued Xiao Chen more than Nangong Yi. Therefore, when facing a direct disciple, an external elder like Nangong Yi would also treat him as an equal and would not put on any airs. He personally invited Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao to take a seat, then ordered someone to serve tea. After some simple pleasantries, Xiao Chen went straight to the point. He looked at Nangong Yi and asked, "May I ask Elder Nangong, the Nangong Yen captured by the Qingma gang this time is from family Nangong, right?" Xiao Chen already knew the answer. In the records of this mission, the identity of the Nangong Yen was clearly stated. She was indeed from family Nangong. She was also the daughter of the current head of family Nangong, Nangong Feihong, who was also the elder brother of Nangong Yi. Family Nangong was one of the top 2 families in Tianfeng Prefecture, the number 1 family in the south. Therefore, Nangong Yan's status was very high. Of course, if that was not the case, He Feng would not have sent Xiao Chen to carry out this mission. Thinking about it, if it was not a Nangong Yen who was kidnapped, a few core disciples or a deacon of sage sect would have been sent. But He Feng sent Xiao Chen. To put it bluntly, this was a signal to family Nangong that sage sect valued the Nangong Yen. That was why they did not hesitate to send a pro-disciple to carry out this mission. One must know that the status of a pro-disciple was much higher than that of a deacon of sage sect. In some ways, even an elder of sage sect could not compare to a pro-disciple. Obviously, both family Nangong and Nangong Yi were very satisfied with this signal from sage sect. The fact that a pro-disciple came personally was enough to prove that sage sect valued this mission. Facing Xiao Chen's question, Nangong Yi nodded and replied, Yen is indeed a member of family Nangong, and is also my niece. To be honest, my elder brother is very worried about her being kidnapped by the Qingma gang. But it's a pity that the Qingma gang is very cunning. They have been hiding at the border between Tianfeng Prefecture and Tianyue Prefecture. As soon as there is a disturbance, the Qingma gang will run into Tianyue Prefecture's territory. Our family Nangong has been having a headache over this. As the number one clan in Tianfeng Prefecture, the family Nangong naturally thought that in terms of strength, they could easily crush the Qingma gang. But here was the problem. The Qingma gang did not have any direct contact with the family Nangong or Tianfeng Xingzong. Moreover, it had been 7 days since the Nangong Yen and the dozen Tianfeng Xingzong disciples were kidnapped. But the Qingma gang did not make any demands. Without any demands, the family Nangong could not take any further action. It was strange that they kidnapped them without making any demands. At the same time, the Qingma gang had been hiding at Fengyue Mountain, which was the border between Tianfeng Prefecture and Tianyue Prefecture. As the border between the two prefectures, it naturally became a lawless place. Neither Tianfeng Prefecture nor Tianyue Prefecture had a strong management of this place. In addition, warriors from both prefectures lived here at the same time. Over time, this place became a city of crime, where crooks mixed in with the honest folk. Xiao Chen had more or less grasped the situation of this mission. The reason why he came to southern border city to meet Nangong Yi was that he hoped to get the family Nangong's help. After all, the family Nangong was the largest clan in the south. In terms of strength, it was not inferior to the three major sects, the Iron Sword sect. Moreover, the family Nangong had been operating in the south of Tianfeng Prefecture for so many years, so it was natural that they had built a huge network of information. It would be difficult for Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao to find out the whereabouts of the Qingma gang as soon as possible. Therefore, it would be best to rely on the family Nangong's information network. As if he had guessed Xiao Chen's thoughts, Nangong Yi spoke first before Xiao Chen could say anything. Nephew Xiao Chen, to tell you the truth, if you want to rely on the family Nangong's information network, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. Oh, what do you mean, Elder Nangong? Upon hearing Nangong Yi's words, Xiao Chen asked curiously. Sigh, I'm ashamed to say this. Xiao Chen indeed wanted to rely on the family Nangong's information network, but Nangong Yi had his own difficulties. He let out a sigh and told Xiao Chen the truth without hiding anything. 6th update, please bookmark, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 623. Xiao Chen's original plan was indeed to use the family Nangong's information network. After all, the person who was kidnapped was the eldest daughter of the family Nangong. Therefore, the family Nangong had no reason to refuse to help him. Furthermore, if he could obtain the help of the family Nangong, it would definitely be a great help to Xiao Chen. Unfortunately, Nangong Yi's words were like a bucket of cold water that completely destroyed Xiao Chen's plan. According to Nangong Yi, the family Nangong had mobilized all their resources to search for the Qingma gang's stronghold. Unfortunately, there were no clues at all. Therefore, it was impossible for Xiao Chen to use the family Nangong's information network to find the Qingma gang. This was because if it was possible, the family Nangong would have already rescued the Nangong Yen. Xiao Chen wouldn't even need to do anything. Hearing Nangong Yi's words, Xiao Chen sighed helplessly. He had already thought that the most difficult part of this mission wasn't the rescue, nor was it eliminating the Qingma gang. Instead, it was finding the Qingma gang's stronghold. That was the most difficult part. Originally, he thought that he could rely on the family Nangong's power. However, it seemed that he couldn't do so anymore. This meant that it would be even more difficult to find the Qingma gang's stronghold. He felt helpless. However, at this moment, Gu Lingyao said softly, "Xiao Chengij, you should have known that the family Nangong is unreliable." Gu Lingyao wasn't surprised by Nangong Yi's words. Hearing this, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao looked at her with doubt. It seemed like this little girl had more to say. As expected, under their gazes, Gu Lingyao continued. Since the Qingma gang kidnapped the eldest daughter of the family Nangong, they will naturally be on guard against the family Nangong. Therefore, it is impossible to rely on the family Nangong's information network to find the Qingma gang. However, if we use other methods or borrow the power of others to find the Qingma gang, it might be effective. After hearing Gu Lingyao's words, Xiao Chen and Nangong Yi came to their senses at the same time. Nangong Yi slapped his thigh and said happily, "Yes, why didn't I think of that? Since the Qingma gang kidnapped Yen they will naturally put most of their energy on guard against the family Nangong. Therefore, the family Nangong's information network will naturally not be able to find the Qingma gang. However, it is precisely because the Qingma gang has placed most of their energy on the family Nangong that the Qingma gang will definitely give themselves away if other powers secretly start looking for clues. Since the Qingma gang had placed most of their attention on the family Nangong, it would naturally be difficult to use the family Nangong's power to find the Qingma gang. However, if other powers were to secretly take action, then the results would be different. After all, the Qingma gang could not guard against all the powers in the southern region. Gu Lingyao's words enlightened Nangong Yi. At the same time, Xiao Chen looked at Gu Lingyao with a smile and asked, "Then according to Lingyao, who do you think we should find to do this?" He knew that Gu Lingyao was extremely intelligent, especially when it came to crafty ideas. It was no wonder that when they were in the Heavenly Wind Holy Sect, the little girl had confidently said that Xiao Chen would not regret bringing her out. It was time for the little girl to show her power so soon. In response to Xiao Chen's question, Gu Lingyao smiled and said cutely, "Actually, I've already thought about it. Isn't there a power in the southern region called Worry-Free Restaurant? Let's go find them." Worry-Free Restaurant. Nangong Yi frowned when he heard Gu Lingyao's words. He had been guarding southern border city for many years, so he naturally knew about Worry-Free Restaurant. However, there were many sects in the southern region of Tianfeng Prefecture that were more powerful than Worry-Free Restaurant. Yet, Gu Lingyao had chosen Worry-Free Restaurant. Obviously, Worry-Free Restaurant was not Nangong Yi's first choice. He did not understand what Gu Lingyao was up to. In terms of strength, Worry-Free Restaurant was the weakest power in the southern region. Moreover, although Worry-Free Restaurant was said to be a power in the southern region, it was actually a chain of brothels. It was a joke to ask a power formed by brothels to investigate. Gu Lingyao frowned and said with a smile, "Elder Nangong, don't worry. Elder Nangong need not worry too much. Once I finish speaking, you will naturally know why Lingyao chose Worry-Free Restaurant." Hearing this, Nangong Yi continued to listen to what Gu Lingyao had to say. According to Gu Lingyao, although Worry-Free Restaurant was weak, it was definitely good at collecting information. Moreover, it was about bandits like the Qingma gang, so Worry-Free Restaurant was the best choice. Why? Firstly, Worry-Free Restaurant was a brothel. Worry-Free Restaurant existed in almost every major city in the southern region of Tianfeng Prefecture. Secondly, where in the world did information flow the fastest? There were only a few places. It was either a restaurant or a brothel. Therefore, Worry-Free Restaurant's ability to collect information was definitely one of the best in the southern region. Secondly, bandits like the Green Horse Gang, what was their purpose in robbing people and earning money? It was nothing more than seeking pleasure. After making money, where would bandits like the Qingma gang go to? Worry-free restaurant, of course. A brothel like this was definitely the first choice for Bandit. Lastly, and most importantly, when was a man the easiest time to reveal the secret in his heart? There was no need to think too much about this question. It was either at the table or in the arms of a woman. Worry-free restaurant fulfilled these two conditions. It had both good wine and beautiful women. A woman was a hero's grave. In front of a beautiful woman, men were the easiest to make mistakes. Therefore, Worry-free restaurant was the best choice to find out where the Qingma gang was. After listening to Gu Lingyao's explanation, Xiao Qin smiled but didn't say anything. Nangong Yi let out a long sigh of relief. At the same time, he looked at Gu Lingyao with a strange look in his eyes. Previously, he didn't think that there was anything special about Gu Lingyao. However, after listening to her explanation, Nangong Yi didn't dare to underestimate her anymore. She was simply a little girl with monstrous intelligence. She had thought of everything and analyzed everything in detail. At this moment, Nangong Yi also felt that Worry-free restaurant was the best choice to gather information. However, although he had a plan, it wasn't easy to get Worry-free restaurant to help. Worry-free restaurant had always acted strangely and operated a brothel. Therefore, Worry-free restaurant had always maintained a neutral attitude with the major forces in the southern region. They didn't offend anyone and didn't rely on anyone. Therefore, it would be difficult to get Worry-free restaurant to help. 7th update, please bookmark, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 6:24. It would be very difficult to get the Worry-free restaurant to help. He told Xiao Chun and Gu Lingyao about his concerns. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chun asked Nangong Yi to use the family Nangong's power to investigate the Worry-free restaurant. He would investigate as much as he could, and he had to hand it over to him by tomorrow at the latest. Whether it was Xiao Chun or Gu Lingyao, they didn't know much about the Worry-free restaurant. Under such circumstances, even Gu Lingyao couldn't do anything. However, with the family Nangong's help, it shouldn't be difficult. As expected, after hearing Xiao Chen's words, Nangong Yi agreed without hesitation and said confidently, "Don't worry, Xiao Chen. I'll give you the information on the Worry-free restaurant tonight. Even if we can't investigate the Qingma gang, it won't be difficult for us to investigate the Worry-free restaurant with the power of the family Nangong. Why don't you go and rest first? I'll get someone to send you the information on the Worry-free restaurant later." Xiao Chen replied with a smile when he heard Nangong Yi's words. Then, Nangong Yi arranged for him to rest in the city lord's estate. Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao were arranged to rest in a small independent courtyard. Without any outsiders, Xiao Chen lightly flicked Gu Lingyao's forehead and said with a smile, "Little girl, your mind is filled with schemes and schemes. Anyone that's targeted by you will truly suffer misfortune. In my opinion, even if it's a Dao Emperor realm expert, his days would probably be difficult if he was targeted by you." Xiao Chen had already experienced Gu Lingyao's intelligence and wits. When she heard Xiao Chen's words, Gu Lingyao pouted unhappily. "I'm not targeting anyone else. I've only been targeting Big Brother Xiao Chen my entire life." "Haha, if that's the case, doesn't that mean I'm doomed for the rest of my life?" Xiao Chen laughed heartily. "That's true. If Big Brother Xiao Chen dares to let me down in the future, I will definitely kill you with my own hands." Gu Lingyao made a peace sign and pretended to be fierce as she spoke. Xiao Chen pulled the little girl into his arms and kissed her fiercely. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, our Miss Lingyao is so beautiful, how could I let go?" Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Gu Lingyao blushed and leaned against Xiao Chen with a happy smile on her face. The two of them cuddled in the courtyard for more than half a day. At dusk, Nangong Yi indeed sent someone to deliver information about Forgotten Worries restaurant. They still used the memory stone to memorize the information, but this time, the person using the memory stone was Gu Lingyao. The information about Forgotten Worries restaurant was deeply engraved in her mind. Then, Gu Lingyao briefly explained the contents of the report to Xiao Chen. Hearing this, Xiao Chen asked with a smile. How is it? Did our intelligent Miss Lingyao come up with any good ideas? Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Gu Lingyao did not answer. Instead, she asked with a bright face, Big brother Xiao Chen, what do you think about this Forgotten Worries restaurant? Xiao Chen did not know what this little girl meant, but he still answered truthfully. There's nothing special about it. According to the information given by the family Nangong, this Forgotten Worries restaurant is a very ordinary brothel. Then Big brother Xiao Chen, do you know that many things are even more special when there's nothing special about them? Gu Lingyao smiled and said. Hearing this, Xiao Chen was stunned. But before he could say anything, Gu Lingyao continued. Big brother Xiao Chen, think about it. How can a faction that can spread its power throughout the entire southern part of Tianfeng Prefecture be as simple as the information given by the family Nangong says? If that's really the case, then this Forgotten Worries restaurant would have been destroyed countless times already. You have to know that this brothel is a money-making machine. With such a big piece of cake, don't you think other factions would be jealous? But Forgotten Worries restaurant has been able to defend itself perfectly until now. From this, it can be seen that this Forgotten Worries restaurant is not simple. Lingyao, what do you mean? Hearing this, Xiao Chen also reacted and asked with a thoughtful expression. In this situation, we can only say that the family Nangong's information system is completely unable to find out the true situation of Forgotten Worries restaurant. The information they have is probably only what Forgotten Worries restaurant is willing to give. In other words, in terms of information system, the number one family in the southern part of the country is inferior to Forgotten Worries restaurant, Gu Lingyao said with a smile. As one of the two major families in Tianfeng Prefecture, the number one family in the southern part of the country, family Nangong, was actually inferior to Forgotten Worries restaurant in terms of information system. This was simply too shocking. Gu Lingyao was not disappointed in the slightest. Instead, she smiled excitedly. But this is also good. The stronger Forgotten Worries restaurant's information system is, the better it is for Xiao Chen. This is because it will be easier to find the whereabouts of the Qingma gang, complete the mission as soon as possible, and rescue the disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong as well as the Nangong Yan's eldest daughter. Hearing Gu Lingyao's words, Xiao Chen nodded slightly. Indeed, the stronger Forgotten Worries restaurant was, the more help it would be to him. However, the problem now was, how could he convince Forgotten Worries restaurant to help him? If he could not convince Forgotten Worries restaurant, then everything was just empty talk. After some discussion, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao finally decided to start with Forgotten Worries restaurant in southern border city. According to family Nangong's information, Forgotten Worries restaurant in southern border city was the largest forgotten restaurant in the southern part of the country. It was very likely to be the headquarters of Forgotten Worries restaurant. Since it was the largest forgotten restaurant in southern border city, there must be experts in charge of it. It was even possible that the owner of Forgotten Worries restaurant would be there. If they could meet the owner of Forgotten Worries restaurant, then things would be easier. After all, there would be room for negotiation. Without further ado, after some preparations, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao immediately left the governor's mansion and rushed to Forgotten Worries restaurant. Of course, they did not bring Nangong Yi with them. Xiao Chen also took off his Tianfeng robe. After all, his identity as Tianfeng Xingzong's personal disciple was too conspicuous and unsuitable for the next operation. Even Gu Lingyao disguised herself as a man and put on a man's robe. Indeed, Gu Lingyao, disguised as a man, did look very much like a fair-skinned young man. With her fair and delicate skin and her big, watery eyes, she did indeed look like a typical rich young master. The two walked together. Xiao Chen was handsome, but Gu Lingyao, disguised as a man, did not appear inferior to Xiao Chen at all. She was also very attractive. At least, on the way from the governor's mansion, Xiao Chun had already noticed that many girls were infatuated with Gu Lingyao. "If you were a man, I'm afraid that girls would like you more than me," Xiao Chun whispered to Gu Lingyao with a gentle smile. Hearing this, Gu Lingyao also smiled and replied, "But I don't want to be a man. If I were a man, I wouldn't be able to stay by brother Xiao Chen's side all the time." 8th update. Please bookmark, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 625. While they were talking, they had already arrived outside the worry-free restaurant. It was worthy of being called the largest brothel in the south of the Sky Wind Prefecture. Just by standing at the entrance, one could feel the charm of the worry-free restaurant. It was a simple courtyard door, but there were exquisite red lanterns hanging on both sides. Wisps of soft pink light were constantly emitted from the lanterns, making the courtyard door look extremely ambiguous. At the entrance, one after another, important figures with extraordinary statuses walked into the courtyard. At the same time, one could vaguely see a few scantily clad maids walking back and forth in the courtyard. Furthermore, one could vaguely hear the sound of the spring rain, which was like a hanging beam circling around a pillar, lingering in one's ears. Just by standing at the entrance, the temptation of Wang Yu Restaurant was enough to make any man lose control. It really lived up to its reputation. Wang Yu Restaurant, it was indeed a place that could make people forget their worries. Gu Lingyao could not help blushing when she saw the scene in front of her, and the ambiguous smell in the air. Sensing Gu Lingyao's change, Xiao Qin asked, "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" Xiao Qin knew that the little girl was thin-skinned. Otherwise, she would not have avoided him for so long. Although she was dressed as a man, Gu Lingyao could not help but feel a little shy when faced with such an atmosphere in Wang Yu Restaurant. Faced with Xiao Chen's concern, Gu Lingyao gritted her teeth and kept telling herself to stay calm. Then, she took a deep breath and shook her head. "It's okay, brother Xiao Chen. Let's go." Originally, Gu Lingyao did not need to come with Xiao Chen. After all, it was not suitable for a little girl like her to come to this brothel. However, she insisted on coming. Of course, Xiao Chen did not know that Gu Lingyao insisted on following Xiao Chen because she was afraid that Xiao Chen would not be able to resist the temptation of Wang Yu Restaurant. Therefore, Gu Lingyao kept a close eye on Xiao Chen and did not give him any chance, let alone the thieves in Wang Yu Restaurant. If Xiao Chen knew that Gu Lingyao insisted on coming because she wanted to keep a close eye on him, Xiao Chen would probably fall flat on his face. This little girl had underestimated his willpower. Not to mention Qin Shuru and Fairy of 100 Flowers, Gu Lingyao's appearance was far from what these common women could compare with. The women around Xiao Chen were all devastatingly beautiful. Xiao Chen believed that his resistance to women was definitely much higher than other men. This was the same principle as one who was marked by the company one kept. If one was surrounded by beautiful women, one's standards would naturally be higher. Of course, this did not mean that the women in Wang Yu Restaurant were not good-looking. On the contrary, the women in Wang Yu Restaurant, even if they were just maids, were extremely beautiful. However, this also depended on who they were compared to. In a crowd, the women in Wang Yu Restaurant were indeed 1 in 10,000 beauties. However, compared to Gu Lingyao, they paled in comparison. If they were 1 in 10,000, then Gu Lingyao was 1 in a million, no, 1 in 10 million. Following closely behind Xiao Chen, they walked into the small courtyard of Wang Yu Restaurant. This courtyard's design was very unique. The front courtyard was not big, it could even be said to be very small. However, there were 5 intersections in the front courtyard that led to the back courtyard. In other words, Wang Yu Restaurant had a total of 5 back courtyards. Moreover, these 5 back courtyards were the true places to seek pleasure. There were artificial mountains, lakes, pavilions hung with light gauze, and rooms with 2 lights. These were the true places of happiness in Wang Yu Restaurant. Just as they entered the front courtyard, a scantily dressed maid quickly came up to them. Looking at the handsome faces of Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao, This maid blushed slightly and said shyly, like a girl next door. Young masters, do you have a lady that you like? Under normal circumstances, people who came to Wang Yu restaurant naturally had a lady that they liked. However, this was Xiao Chen's first time here, so naturally, he did not have one. Looking at the shy maid, Xiao Chen said with a smile. Haha, we're not from southern border city. We're new here, so we don't know any ladies that we're familiar with. We'll have to trouble you. But we don't like those common girls. We want the best, got it? With that, Xiao Chen directly took out 10 mid-level spirit stones from his storage ring and casually gave them to the maid as a reward. Seeing that Xiao Chen had taken out 10 mid-tier spiritual stones in one go, the maidservant was immediately overjoyed. Her attitude also became a lot more enthusiastic, and her body even leaned toward Xiao Chen, whether intentionally or not. Gu Lingyao, who was standing off to the side, watched as the maidservant took the opportunity to get closer to Xiao Chen. There were even 2 occasions when the maidservant's breasts brushed against Xiao Chen's arm. Gu Lingyao gritted his teeth and looked at the maid with a murderous look in his eyes. If it were not for Xiao Chen's task, there was no doubt that Gu Lingyao would have already killed her. Xiao Chen also noticed that Gu Lingyao was trying hard to suppress the fire in his heart. At this time, he was also very helpless. What the hell was this? Bringing my fiancée to visit a brothel? I, Xiao Chen, am probably the first person in history to do this. He was extremely depressed, but he couldn't show it. If he wanted to successfully get in touch with the core members of Forgotten Worries Tower, he naturally couldn't give himself away, at least not before. Therefore, Xiao Chen ignored Gu Lingyao and clawed at the maidservant. The maidservant immediately pouted, while Xiao Chen pretended to laugh loudly and said, "Don't worry about it, Gu Lingyao. Haha, you are really very attractive. Why don't you accompany me tonight?" Hearing Xiao Chen's words, a touch of joy flashed across the maid's eyes, but soon she shook her head and refused. "Young master, you must be joking. I am just a maid. According to the rules, I am not allowed to receive guests. Let me introduce you to other ladies." "Haha, that's a pity. I was thinking that I would be able to get close to her tonight." While teasing the maid, Xiao Chen and the other 2 walked to one of the backyards. When Xiao Chen was brought to a pavilion in the backyard, Xiao Chen could only vaguely see that there was a person sitting in the pavilion because of the large red veil hanging around the pavilion. "Young master, Miss Lien Yi is our top hostess," the maid whispered to Xiao Chen. "Haha, good. If you are not bad, I will definitely reward you handsomely." Hearing this, Xiao Chen laughed loudly. "Thank you, young master. Also, if young master wants me, you can come to my residence. That way, no one will say anything." Hearing this, the maid bowed. But in the end, she said something that made Xiao Chen not know whether to laugh or cry. Moreover, because of this sentence, Gu Lingyao completely exploded. He quietly moved his hand to Xiao Chen's waist and pinched his waist with 2 fingers. Then, he twisted fiercely. Xiao Chen immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. 9th update, please bookmark, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 626. Gu Lingyao, who had been holding it in all this while, finally exploded. But the target of his anger was Xiao Chen. What was the most powerful skill for a woman in this world? It was probably this pinch. Even with Xiao Chen's tempered body, he found it hard to resist the power that erupted from the 2 slender fingers. The heart-wrenching pain made his hair stand on end. Xiao Chen endured the sharp pain in his waist and sent the maid away. Then, he turned to Gu Lingyao and said angrily, "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" It's your fault for being a womanizer," Gu Lingyao said angrily. "Womanizer?" Xiao Chen was frustrated and tried to explain. "How am I flirting? This is just an act. If you want to put on an act, you have to go all the way, do you understand? Otherwise, how can we meet the core members of the upper echelons of Wang Yulu?" According to what you said, can we also do it in bed?" Gu Lingyao snorted. This. Xiao Chen didn't know how to respond to Gu Lingyao's words. In theory, it should be possible. After all, he sacrificed himself for the mission. Of course, he couldn't say this to Gu Lingyao. She was like a powder keg that was about to explode. So, it was better not to provoke her at this time. Seeing that Xiao Chen was speechless, Gu Lingyao continued. See, you don't have anything to say, do you? Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? There are no good men in this world. Outside the pavilion, Gu Lingyao vented his anger while Xiao Chen tried his best to explain. Soon, under Xiao Chen's gentle attack, Gu Lingyao managed to suppress the anger in his heart. However, he also warned Xiao Chen solemnly that even if it was an act, it couldn't be like just now. In response, Xiao Chen nodded vigorously. After calming Gu Lingyao down, the two of them stepped into the pavilion. Sure enough, there was a beautiful woman sitting in the pavilion. When she saw Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao enter, the woman stood up and bowed. Greetings, young masters. I'm Lieni. It must be said that there were different levels of brothels. The lower-level brothels were just tools for men to vent their lust. However, the women in Forgotten Worries restaurant could not be compared to those lower-level brothels. All of them could be said to be proficient in the 4 arts. They were gentle, virtuous, and multi-talented. This kind of woman was the most lethal to men, and this was also the reason why men lingered on Wang Yulu so much that they forgot to return. Gu Lingyao smiled at Lieni. The maid was right. Lieni looked very gentle and lovely. She looked weak and delicate. Men would want to protect her at first glance. She personally invited Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao to take a seat. Then, Lieni ordered some dishes to be served. There were a few simple dishes to go with the wine and a jug of decent wine. After pouring a cup of wine for the two of them, Lieni smiled faintly and said, "Please enjoy, young masters. I'll be so bold as to play a song for the two of you to liven up your mood." As she spoke, Lieni went to her zither and knelt down. Her hands gently floated the strings. A beautiful song entered Xiao Chen's ears. It was indeed not bad. She looked delicate and lovely. Although her zither skills weren't shocking, she was already at a higher level. While listening to Lieni's zither music and drinking the wine, Xiao Chen was thinking about how to meet the higher-ups of Forgotten Worries house. The simplest way was to cause trouble. If someone caused trouble, the experts of Forgotten Worries house would definitely show up. However, it wasn't the right time to do that, because he didn't know much about Forgotten Worries house. Secondly, Xiao Chen had a favor to ask of Forgotten Worries house. If he offended them, there was no point in talking. While Xiao Chen was thinking about what to do next, on the other side, on a 3-story building in the depths of Forgotten Worries house, a beautiful woman in her 30s wearing a light green dress looked at the pavilion Xiao Chen was in with a faint smile. The beautiful woman didn't look young, but this didn't hinder her beauty. Compared to those young girls in their 20s, the beautiful woman had a mature and charming temperament. With the beautiful woman's appearance, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that even Lieni paled in comparison. Only a peerless fairy like Gu Lingyao could surpass her. With a faint smile on her face, the beautiful woman's gaze never left the pavilion Xiao Chen was in. After a while, a maid silently appeared behind the beautiful woman. This maidservant was different from the maidservants outside. The maidservants outside had almost no cultivation, and even if they did, their cultivation was pitifully low. However, this maidservant emitted a cold aura from head to toe. She was clearly not an ordinary maidservant. The maid respectfully bowed to the beautiful woman and softly called out, "Hall master. Invite the guest in that pavilion over. Say that it's an invitation from an old friend." Hearing this, the beautiful woman still looked at the pavilion Xiao Chen was in and said indifferently. Hearing the beautiful woman's words, the maid nodded, then turned around and disappeared from the room. He was casually chatting with Lieni in the pavilion. Of course, most of the time, Xiao Chen was indirectly inquiring about Forgotten Worries house. Unfortunately, Lieni was only an extremely ordinary woman in Forgotten Worries house. Naturally, she didn't know much about Forgotten Worries house. As a result, after some probing, Xiao Chen gloomily discovered that he didn't obtain any useful information from Liani. Just as Xiao Chen was feeling gloomy, a maid suddenly walked in from outside the pavilion. Liani hurriedly stood up and bowed when she saw the maid walk in. From her actions, she seemed to be very afraid of the maid. Ignoring Liani, the maid looked at Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao and said expressionlessly, "Young masters, my mistress invites you." Who's your mistress?" Hearing this, Xiao Chen asked. "You'll know when you get there. My mistress said that it's an invitation from an old friend, so you can rest assured," the maid replied. Xiao Chen was even more confused when he heard the invitation from an old friend. But after thinking about it, he nodded and left with the maidservant. He did not know who had invited him, but perhaps this was a breakthrough. Moreover, it was impossible for Forgotten Worries restaurant to do anything to him in southern border city. Besides, there was no reason for Forgotten Worries restaurant to do anything to him. After all, Xiao Chen had never come in contact with Forgotten Worries house, so there was no enmity between them. Moreover, he didn't come here with the slightest hostility. Thinking of this, Xiao Chen felt much more at ease. He followed the maid and walked to the 3-story building in the depths of the backyard. "I'm looking for your collection, looking for your monthly votes, looking for your recommendation." End of chapter. Chapter 627. Following behind this servant girl, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao passed through the back courtyard. They entered through an extremely hidden courtyard door and arrived at a small courtyard in the deepest part of Forgotten Worry House. Forgotten Worry House's construction was indeed ingenious. There was a front courtyard, a middle courtyard, and even a hidden back courtyard. The 5 middle courtyards were responsible for receiving guests. However, this back courtyard was extremely quiet and even a bit strange. There was no light and it was pitch black. Following closely behind Xiao Chen, Gu Lingyao lightly tugged on the corner of Xiao Chen's clothes and said with sole remembrance, "Brother Xiao Chen, this place is so strange." "It is a bit strange, but it's perfect. Such a hidden place is definitely where Forgotten Worry House's upper echelons live." Hearing Gu Lingyao's words, Xiao Chen quietly replied. He had already seen that the servant girl in front of him wasn't a normal person. Moreover, the faint killing intent that unconsciously emanated from her body caused Xiao Chen to be shocked. Such a person was actually a maid. If that was the case, then who was her master? Clearly, it wasn't a normal person. Originally, they came here to see Forgotten Worry House's upper echelons. Now, they seemed to have hit the mark by a stroke of luck. Therefore, Xiao Chen patiently followed the servant girl to the outside of the 3-story small building. "Young master, please. Madam is already waiting for you inside." Gesturing to Xiao Chen, the servant girl clearly didn't have any intentions of following them in. Nodding slightly to the servant girl, Xiao Chen brought Gu Lingyao into the small building. The light was a bit dim, but they could still see the surroundings clearly. Scanning the area, there was no one on the first floor. Without hesitation, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao stepped onto the second floor. There was also no one there. Finally, at the 3rd floor's staircase, Xiao Chen lightly knocked on the door. After getting a response from the person inside, Xiao Chen pushed the door open and entered. Along the way to the only room on the 3rd floor, Xiao Chen saw a beautiful woman in a light green dress leaning against the window with her back facing him. Xiao Chen didn't see the appearance of this person, but he felt that this person was very familiar. But soon, as the beautiful woman turned around, Xiao Chen was stunned at first, but soon he said with a little excitement, "Peak Master Su Jin?" There was a trace of doubt in his voice. Hearing this, the beautiful woman smiled faintly and said, "Xiao Chen." The beautiful woman's words undoubtedly confirmed her identity. That's right, she was the Peak Master of Holy Maiden Peak, one of the 9 peaks of 9 firmaments palace back in Heavenly Chen continent. Back then, Xiao Chen had interacted with her quite a bit. Aside from Heavenly Sword Peak, Su Zhen was probably the Peak Master he was most familiar with. Xiao Chen didn't expect to meet Su Jin here. He was pleasantly surprised. The two of them looked at each other for a while, then Su Jin invited Xiao Chen and Gu Lingling to take a seat. At this time, Gu Lingyao asked with a smile, "Big brother Xiao Chen, she is?" Gu Lingyao naturally didn't know Su Jin. Hearing this, Xiao Chen didn't hide anything. After all, Gu Lingyao already knew about his matters. He simply told Gu Lingyao about Su Jin's identity. After knowing that Su Jin and Xiao Chen came from the same place, Gu Lingyao slowly let down her guard against Su Jin. "Little miss, you don't have to be so guarded against me. Xiao Chen is the treasure of our heavenly Chen continent. I can't bear to harm him." Seeing Gu Lingyao's guard against her, Su Jin said with a smile. Hearing Su Jin's words, Gu Lingyao said with some surprise, "You? How do you know that I'm not a man? How can there be a man who looks so delicate and pretty? Moreover, you and Xiao Chen are so intimate. In addition, Xiao Chen actually told you everything about himself. Naturally, it's not hard to guess." Su Jin replied with a smile. Previously, when Xiao Chen told Gu Lingyao about the heavenly Chen continent, Su Jin felt that it was strange. But after thinking about it, Su Jin understood. It was obvious that this little girl in front of her was Xiao Chen's woman. As soon as her voice fell, Su Jin turned her head and looked at Xiao Chen with a teasing gaze. It was as if she was saying, "Boy, you're good. You've only been in the Heavenly River continent for a few years, and you've already found a beautiful little girl. But, have you thought about how you're going to tell Qin Shuru and Hundred Flower Fairy?" Everyone in the Heavenly Chen continent knew that Xiao Chen was definitely a man who was blessed to the point of making others envious and jealous. Because Xiao Chen's two lovers were the most beautiful women in the Heavenly Chen continent. Even later, the people of the Heavenly Chen continent called Qin Shuru and Hundred Flower Fairy the Heavenly Chen continent's double beauties. Sitting alone with two beauties, one could imagine Xiao Chen's luck with women. Facing Su Jin's teasing gaze, Xiao Chen awkwardly coughed and said, "Cough, that, Peak Master Su Jin, the matter between me and Lingyao is a long story. It's a little different from what you think." Knowing what Su Jin was thinking, Xiao Chen embarrassedly explained. Hearing this, Su Jin covered her mouth and chuckled, "You don't have to explain to me. I'm not anyone to you." Meeting an old friend in a foreign land was indeed a happy thing. Therefore, Xiao Chen didn't immediately say that he needed help from Carefree Restaurant. Anyway, since he met Su Jin here, there shouldn't be any problems. Xiao Chen was 100% sure that Su Jin would help him. This was something he had confidence in. After ordering the servants to prepare food and wine, Gu Lingyao didn't have to continue disguising herself as a man here. She simply took off the hat on her head. In an instant, 3,000 strands of black hair flowed down from Gu Lingyao's shoulders. It could be said that Gu Lingyao's feminine side was added. Seeing this, Su Jin was a little stunned. In Su Jin's memory, Qin Shuru and Fairy of 100 Flowers were already extremely beautiful women. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were devastatingly beautiful. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were the two most beautiful women in the Heavenly Chen continent. However, after seeing Gu Lingyao's feminine side, Su Jin discovered that this woman was actually not inferior to Qin Shuru and Fairy of 100 Flowers. Of course, in terms of appearance, Gu Lingyao might be a little inferior to the two women. However, Gu Lingyao won in terms of her innate spiritual aura. Her pair of big eyes were extremely beautiful. At the same time, Gu Lingyao didn't need to show anything. She was like a natural fairy that made people unconsciously want to protect and get close to her. Qin Shuru was cold and elegant, Fairy of 100 Flowers was gentle, and Gu Lingyao was lively. Slightly stunned, Su Jin once again looked at Xiao Chen. Even though Su Jin was a woman, she couldn't help but admire Xiao Chen's luck with women. It was really infuriating. To say that 3 women for a peerless monster like Xiao Chen wasn't a lot. Even if he had 10 or 20 women, it would still be normal. However, The three women beside Xiao Qin were all devastatingly beautiful and had different temperaments. This was enough to make people envious. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 628. Su Zhen was secretly surprised by Gu Lingyao's beauty. At the same time, she couldn't help but admire Xiao Qian's luck with women. This brat really made girls fall in love with him. Su Zhen looked at Xiao Qin with a smile. Facing Su Zhen's gaze, Xiao Qin naturally guessed what she was thinking. In this regard, Xiao Qin could only helplessly smile. This kind of thing would only make things worse if he tried to explain. It was better to keep silent. No longer teasing Xiao Qin, the three of them ate and chatted. First, Xiao Qin told Su Zhen about the situation in the Moonless Empire and Danyang County. When she heard that Xiao Qin was actually with the Burning Sky ruler, Su Zhen was stunned. She secretly thought that Xiao Qin's luck was really good. He was actually able to become a ruler. However, this was also good. With the Burning Sky ruler, Xiao Qin's safety was at least not too much to worry about. Moreover, not only that, according to Xiao Qin, the Moonless Empire had already become the rear base of the heavenly Qin continent. With Chu Wuming in charge, the Moonless Empire obviously didn't have to worry about anything. Moreover, Xiao Qin had secretly paved a cultivation path for the heavenly Qin continent's warriors. First was the Moonless Empire, then the Heavenly Qi sect, and then the Tianfeng Xingzong. Such a cultivation path was already enough for many of the Heavenly Qin continent's warriors. After all, their aptitude couldn't compare to Xiao Qin. Being able to enter the Tianfeng Xingzong was already the limit. As for going further, it was very difficult. After hearing what Xiao Qin had done in the Heavenly River continent, Su Zhen also admired him. It could be said that Xiao Qin's hand had indeed solved the worries of the Heavenly Qin continent's warriors. Those who didn't want to fight to the death could go to the Moonless Empire and follow Xiao Qin's arrangements. In this way, their strength could still be greatly improved. After talking about his own matters, it was Su Zhen's turn. Compared to Xiao Qin, Su Zhen's experience in the Heavenly River continent was much simpler. From the moment she came to the Heavenly River continent, Su Zhen entered the worry-free restaurant. Starting from the bottom, in a few years, Su Zhen had already become the hall master of the Dark Hall. Her cultivation had also broken through from the Dao Sovereign Realm to the Dao Emperor Realm. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if she was still in the Heavenly Qin continent, it would be difficult for her to break through to the Dao Emperor Realm. Because the cultivation environment and martial arts development was too low. So, it was very difficult to break through to the Dao Emperor Realm, not to mention the Saint Realm. Su Zhen told Xiao Qin about her experience. Then, under Xiao Qin's questioning, Su Zhen also told him about the situation at Worry-Free Restaurant. The Worry-Free Restaurant was divided into the Bright Hall and the Dark Hall. As the name implied, the Bright Hall was responsible for managing all the businesses of the Worry-Free Restaurant. On the other hand, the Dark Hall was hidden in the dark and specialized in doing some shady things for the Worry-Free Restaurant. The Dark Hall and the Dark Hall formed the Worry-Free Restaurant. As the hall master of the Dark Hall, Su Zhen naturally knew the situation of the Worry-Free Restaurant very well. After hearing Su Zhen's introduction, Xiao Qin naturally didn't hide anything from her. He said bluntly, "Peak Master Su Zhen, I'm here to ask the Worry-Free Restaurant to investigate the stronghold of the Qingma gang." Su Zhen was still used to calling Su Zhen Peak Master. Hearing Xiao Qin's words, Su Zhen agreed without hesitation. "No problem. This isn't difficult. Moreover, investigating information is the responsibility of the Dark Hall." Su Zhen smiled. In the Worry-Free Restaurant, Su Zhen was definitely a core member. Other than the other hall master of the Bright Hall, there was only one person above Su Zhen. That was the master of the Worry-Free Restaurant. Su Zhen didn't say much about the master of the Worry-Free Restaurant. Xiao Qin didn't ask either. He only knew that the master of the worry-free restaurant was a sage-to-be expert. Su Zhen easily convinced the worry-free restaurant. Moreover, from Su Zhen's tone, it seemed like she wasn't worried about investigating the stronghold of the Qingma gang at all. He thought to himself that he might have underestimated the worry-free restaurant's ability to gather information. Even the family Nangong's intelligence network couldn't find anything. From this, one could see how terrifying the worry-free restaurant's ability to gather information was. After settling the matter, the three of them naturally drank to their heart's content. That night, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao directly stayed at Su Zhen's place. Xiao Chen didn't have to worry about Su Zhen harming him, so he was very relaxed. After arranging for Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao's accommodations, Su Zhen returned to her room. At the same time, the maid who led Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao here received Su Zhen's summons and respectfully waited for her. Hall master. Seeing Su Zhen push open the door and enter, the maid respectfully greeted. Hearing this, Su Zhen nodded slightly and said, "Go investigate the Qingma gang. I want to know where they're staying. Also, pay attention to whether the disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong and the eldest daughter of family Nangong are still alive." That night, Su Zhen arranged for people to start investigating the Qingma gang. Moreover, Su Zhen knew that Xiao Chen's mission was to complete Tianfeng Xingzong's mission, so she paid special attention to the disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong and the eldest daughter of family Nangong. After hearing Su Zhen's words, the maid didn't ask any more questions. She gently nodded and disappeared from the room. After a silent night, when Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao woke up the next day, they also bid farewell to Su Zhen and returned to the southern border city's governor's mansion. According to Su Zhen, it would take some time to investigate the Qingma gang's stronghold. During this time, Su Zhen suggested that Xiao Chen go to the Fengyue mountain range first. When she had any news, she would send someone to inform Xiao Chen. Now that they were certain that the Qingma gang was in the Fengyue mountain range, Xiao Chen could go there first to familiarize himself with the environment. Secondly, he could adapt to the situation and change his plan according to the information he received. Hearing Su Zhen's suggestion, Xiao Chen naturally had no objections. In fact, he also had the same idea. Without any information, he couldn't stay in southern border city forever. After bidding farewell to Su Zhen, Xiao Chen directly returned to the governor's mansion with Gu Lingyao. As soon as Xiao Chen entered the governor's mansion, Nangong Yi sent someone to invite Xiao Chen to the main hall. Hearing this, Xiao Chen knew that Nangong Yi was anxious to get a reply from Wang Yulu. After all, the family Nangong's intelligence network was useless now. If Wang Yulu didn't agree to help, it would be troublesome. Most importantly, the longer they delayed, the more dangerous it would be for the Nangong Yan and the dozen or so Tianfeng Xingzong disciples. As the Nangong Yan's second uncle, Nangong Yi naturally didn't want anything to happen to the Nangong Yan. He didn't refuse and brought Gu Lingyao to the main hall of the governor's mansion. At this time, Nangong Yi was already waiting there. When he saw Xiao Chen coming, Nangong Yi stood up to greet him. Although he pretended to be calm, Xiao Chen could still feel the anxiety in his heart. "Nephew Xiao Chen, how was it? What did Wang Yulu say? Please add it to your collection, monthly vote, recommend it." End of chapter. Chapter 629. Nangong Yi asked anxiously as soon as he saw Xiao Chen. Although he tried his best to appear calm, it was difficult to hide the anxiety in his heart. Knowing that Nangong Yi was very anxious about Forgotten Worries Restaurant's reply, Xiao Chen smiled and cupped his hands at Nangong Yi. "Elder Nangong, I'm fortunate to have accomplished my mission." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Nangong Yi immediately laughed out loud. Then, he personally helped Xiao Chen up and said with a gratified expression, "Nephew Xiao Chen, I'll rely on you to rescue Yan this time. I, Nangong Yi, will do my best to cooperate. If you need any help from me or the family Nangong, please don't hesitate to ask." The family Nangong will definitely thank you after this. His tone was very sincere. At the same time, Nangong Yi's words could be considered as expressing the family Nangong's attitude. As long as Xiao Chen could rescue the Nangong Yen, the family Nangong would definitely stand on Xiao Chen's side in the future. Don't think that Xiao Chen could look down on others just because he was now a direct disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong. One had to know that where there were people, there would be underworld. This was even more so in Tianfeng Xingzong, especially among direct disciples. Each of the top 10 direct disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong had the support of some forces behind them. Take Yi Ting for example. The first force behind him was naturally the Iron Sword sect. Other than that, there were some other forces behind him. After Xiao Chen became the 10th direct disciple, the first force behind him was naturally the Tianqi sect. However, there was still a gap between the Tianqi sect and the Iron Sword sect. As such, if he could obtain the support of the family Nangong, the situation would be different. Moreover, being on good terms with the family Nangong would not only bring benefits, but cultivation resources would also be indispensable. Who would complain about having more cultivation resources? Therefore, being on good terms with the family Nangong was only beneficial to Xiao Chen. Thus, after hearing Nangong Yi's words, Xiao Chen did not refuse. Instead, he smiled and nodded. The three of them sat down in the main hall. Then, Xiao Chen told Nangong Yi about his plan. After learning that Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao planned to head to Fengyue mountain range immediately, Nangong Yi did not stop them. On one hand, he wanted to understand the situation there, and on the other hand, he wanted to wait for an opportunity to make a move. He also knew that it was not a good idea to keep Xiao Chen and Duan Lingtian in southern border city. After all, opportunities were fleeting. It was better for Xiao Chen and Duan Lingtian to go to Fengyue Mountain, where they could react as soon as possible if something happened. On the other hand, if they stayed in southern border city, it would be difficult for Xiao Chen to come up with a plan based on the actual situation. Nangong Yi nodded in agreement with Xiao Chen's idea. However, he still said, "In that case, I'll send family Nangong to Fengyue mountain range with you." Family Nangong would go with Xiao Chen. Upon hearing Nangong Yi's words, Xiao Chen shook his head and said, "Elder Nangong, it's not appropriate for family Nangong to appear in Fengyue mountain range at this time." He rejected Nangong Yi's good intentions. After all, the Green Horse Gang must be guarding against the Nangong family. Once the Nangong family entered the Fengyue Mountains, they would alert the enemy. Moreover, Xiao Chen did not intend to expose his identity so soon. Without family Nangong's people accompanying him, Xiao Chen could enter Fengyue mountain range secretly without attracting anyone's attention. After hearing Xiao Chen's refusal, Nangong Yi said after a moment of silence, "I understand your concerns, but I'm worried that you won't be able to handle it if no one comes with you." As a lawless place, Fengyue mountain range was extremely chaotic. Although it was just a mountain range, there were almost 100 strongholds in it. Yes, strongholds. These strongholds might not be large, and some of them were just like villages. However, 9 out of 10 people who lived in these strongholds were unpardonable villains. It was precisely because there were so many villains gathered in Fengyue mountain range that Nangong Yi was worried about Xiao Chen's safety. After all, there was no need for a reason to kill someone in Fengyue mountain range. One could kill someone just because they didn't like him. Such a simple reason was enough. Moreover, in Fengyue mountain range, not only did one have to be careful of villains, but there were also demonic beasts. As a huge mountain range that connected Skywind Prefecture and Skypeak Prefecture, Fengyue mountain range was naturally inhabited by demonic beasts. However, the strongest demonic beast in Fengyue mountain range was only at the Beast Emperor realm. Therefore, Fengyue mountain range was still dominated by humans. However, demonic beasts would attack humans from time to time. Moreover, some areas were demonic beasts' territory. The combination of humans and monsters created a very special chaotic illusion in the Fengyue Mountains. Therefore, Nangong Yi was still worried about Xiao Chen's safety when he did not send anyone to follow him. After all, the Fengyue Mountains did not lack powerful cultivators. He didn't dare to say that there were half-saint experts, but there were still Dao emperors. He was worried about Xiao Chen's safety. In response, Xiao Chen smiled and said, "Elder Nangong, you're overthinking. To be honest, I'm not that easy to kill. But how about this, Elder Nangong? You can send some family Nangong experts secretly into Fengyue Mountain Range. At that time we can support each other. However, Elder Nangong, you must pay attention to one thing. You can't expose the family Nangong's identity. Elder Nangong, you must send these people into Fengyue Mountain Range secretly." Xiao Chen didn't dare to be careless in the face of the notoriously chaotic area between Skywind Prefecture and Skypeak Prefecture. It was good that the family Nangong sent experts, but they couldn't expose their identity. When he heard Xiao Chen's words, Nangong Yi smiled confidently and said, "Don't worry, it's simple. With the family Nangong's methods, sending some people into Fengyue Mountain Range secretly isn't difficult at all." "Good, that's great. However, Elder Nangong, you must pay attention. You can't send too many people. At most, you can't send more than 10 people. Of course, it's best if you send some capable and strong people. That's enough." Xiao Chen nodded and reminded Nangong Yi. The family Nangong couldn't send more than 10 people at most. Otherwise, not only would there be no benefits, it might even cause trouble. When he heard Xiao Chen's words, Nangong Yi nodded in agreement. Actually, Nangong Yi was aware of this even if Xiao Chen didn't say it. So, Nangong Yi had thought about who to send since the beginning. In Nangong Yi's heart, he only needed 3 experts from the family Nangong to assist Xiao Chen. However, all 3 of them were Dao Emperor Realm experts. With 3 Dao Emperor Realm experts as helpers and the secret assistants of the Forgotten Worries Pavilion, it was more than enough to eliminate the Qingma gang. It was even to the extent that they could do whatever they wanted in Fengyue Mountain Range. After all, the strongest expert in Fengyue Mountain Range was only at the Dao Emperor Realm. Even though half-saints appeared from time to time, would anyone at the half-saint realm be willing to hide in a place like Fengyue Mountain Range for long periods of time? So, 3 Dao Emperor Realm experts were more than enough. Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. End of this chapter. Chapter 630. It could be said that the strongest experts that could hide in Fengyue Mountain Range for a long time were Dao Emperor Realm experts. As for half-saints, unless they were pursued by saints themselves, otherwise, they would only hide in Fengyue Mountain Range for a while. It was impossible for them to stay here for long, and they would leave very quickly. After discussing their next plan, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao immediately headed to the Fengyue Mountain Range through the teleportation formation. As for the 3 Dao Emperors sent by family Nangong, they would enter the Fengyue Mountain Range through other methods later. At that time, they would take the initiative to contact Xiao Chen. It was naturally impossible to reach the Fengyue Mountain Range directly from southern border city. They could only go to a small city outside the Fengyue Mountain Range. From there, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao had to enter the Fengyue Mountain Range on foot. They didn't waste any time and directly rushed out of the Fengyue Mountain Range. Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao didn't encounter any other cultivators along the way from the small city at the border. The road to the Fengyue Mountain Range seemed very deserted. Isn't it rumored that there are over 100,000 villains hiding in the Fengyue Mountain Range? Why is it so deserted? Gu Lingyao asked curiously as they hurried along. Xiao Chen smiled when he heard her and said, "This is only the outskirts of the Fengyue Mountain Range, so there's naturally no one here. Moreover, the Fengyue Mountain Range is famous for being chaotic. If it wasn't for committing a crime, who would come here? So there's naturally no one in the outskirts." It could be said that all the people who lived in the Fengyue Mountain Range were forced here because they couldn't survive in the outside world. They could only drag out an ignoble existence in the Fengyue mountain range. This probably caused the hearts of the villains in the Fengyue mountain range to become even more twisted and perverted. They were like locusts. One locust might be nothing, but when over 100,000 locusts gathered together, it would be a disaster. They didn't encounter any obstacles along the way as they traveled towards the depths of the Fengyue mountain range. It wasn't until a day later that Xiao Chun and Gu Lingyao finally entered the heart of the Fengyue mountain range. Along the way, not to mention the rugged roads, the dense forest that covered the sky made people lose their sense of direction. At the same time, in the Fengyue mountain range, unless one was an idiot or a person with absolute strength, basically no one would choose to fly in the air, because that was equivalent to courting death. One had to know that flying in the air was tantamount to exposing one's identity and telling others to come and snatch them. Therefore, in the Fengyue mountain range, unless there was no other choice, no one would choose to fly. In the Fengyue mountain range, where killing and robbing were as common as eating and drinking, concealing oneself was something that one had to learn. Arrogant people would not survive for long in this place. Don't think that Xiao Chen's identity as Tianfeng Shengzong's 10th personal disciple will have any deterrent effect. In other places, it may be able to make people fear him, but in the Wind Moon mountain range, this identity can be said to be useless. They were originally a group of desperados who had no choice but to enter the Fengyue mountain range because they could no longer survive in the outside world. Therefore, do you think that these people will be afraid of Tianfeng Shengzong's personal disciple? Like the other people who entered the Fengyue mountain range, Xiao Chen maintained his vigilance along the way. After entering the heart of the Fengyue mountain range, Gu Lingyao asked, "Big brother Xiao Chen, where are we going now?" "Let's find a stronghold first. Right now there is still no news from Carefree Restaurant. Let's find a stronghold to stay in first and wait for any changes." Hearing this, Xiao Chen opened his mouth and replied. In the entire Wind Moon mountain range, there were a total of 32 strongholds, called the 32 strongholds of Fengyue mountain range. These 32 strongholds were the main gathering places and living places of these desperados who gathered in the Fengyue mountain range. They planned to find a stronghold to stay in first. Just as Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao were searching for a stronghold, after traveling for about half a day, Xiao Chen and the others finally encountered other cultivators. Just as they were sending messages in the dense forest, the grass in front of them suddenly swayed a few times. Following which, a fat man wearing simple leather clothes walked out of the grass with large strides. His body emitted waves of the stench of sweat. The man had the appearance of a young man. His clothes were shabby, but his appearance was very fierce and his face was fierce. Just like the Xiao Chen duo, this fat man clearly did not expect to meet other people here. A cold glint flashed across his eyes as the storage ring in his hand immediately flashed with a bright light. A long blade appeared in his hand as he coldly shouted, "Who are you?" This was the first reaction one would have when meeting a stranger in the Fengyue mountain range. After all, no one knew if the other party would kill them or not. In this place, trust was the most unattainable thing. Not to mention friends, even blood brothers and father and son could kill each other over a treasure. His cold gaze swept back and forth between Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao. Previously, in order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Xiao Chen had asked Gu Lingyao to disguise herself as a man. Therefore, this fat man did not recognize that Gu Lingyao was a woman. His intuition told him that this young man was quite handsome. There was a slight fear in his heart. At the same time, the fat man was secretly calculating the strength of Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao. If possible, this fat man would definitely not hesitate to kill them and rob them. Both parties stared at each other like this. After a while, Xiao Chen spoke first. "Brother, we have no evil intentions. We have no choice but to come here. After committing a crime in the outside world, we can only hide in the Fengyue mountain range." "You are from the Tianfeng prefecture?" Looking at the direction Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao were heading, the fat man quickly guessed that they were from the Tianfeng prefecture. Hearing this, Xiao Chen nodded and said, "Yes, we are from the southern border city of the Tianfeng prefecture. We are wanted because we killed someone, so we escaped to the Fengyue mountain range." "Oh, so you are new here. However, since you have entered the Fengyue mountain range, you have to follow the rules here. You know that everyone who enters the Fengyue mountain range has to pay a fee of 500 mid-grade primordial stones. You too have to pay 1,000 mid-grade primordial stones. Hurry up and give it to me." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the fat man said fiercely, "Threatening and extorting." Hearing this, Xiao Chen smiled slightly. Then, he walked towards the fat man and said with a smile, "Oh, so that's how it is. I didn't know the rules just now. Here, give the primordial stones to me." At least you know your place." Hearing this, the fat man sneered. The fat man didn't expect to have an unexpected gain from going out. He couldn't help but feel happy. For someone like him, who had lived in the Fengyue mountain range for a long time, he naturally wouldn't let go of a newcomer. Unfortunately, he chose the wrong target. If Xiao Chen was a person who could be threatened so easily, he wouldn't be Xiao Chen. Walking towards the fat man didn't expect that Xiao Chen would not give him a temporary gift, but a fist. Xiao Chen didn't say anything and directly threw a punch at the fat man's face. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 631. The fatty didn't expect Xiao Chen to suddenly attack him. He didn't have time to react at all. He instinctively shouted angrily, "Brat, you're despicable." He thought that Xiao Chen was here to give him money. However, Xiao Chen didn't give him money. Instead, he gave him a fist as big as a casserole pot. With a muffled bang, Xiao Chen punched the fatty in the face without any hesitation. Immediately, the fatty's nose started to bleed. 2 bloody teeth also flew out. After hitting the fatty, Xiao Chen sneered and said, "I thought you were some kind of character. Turns out that you're so weak." After saying that, Xiao Chen's hands didn't stop moving. He jumped up and pressed the fatty to the ground. What happened next was naturally simple. It was a one-sided beating. Facing Xiao Chen's fierce iron fist, the fatty was still very stubborn at first. However, he soon softened. "Humph, let me go if you have the ability. Let's have a fair fight." "Just you wait. Master Dog won't let you go. Just wait for your death." "Ah, big brother, be gentle. Big brother, don't hit my face. I rely on my face to make a living." The fatty's stubbornness only lasted for less than 10 breaths of time. Soon, he gave in. Hearing his begging for mercy, Xiao Chen curled his lips and said, "You rely on your face to make a living? With your face, you'll starve to death sooner or later." Xiao Chen's face was full of disdain, but he stopped what he was doing. He grabbed the fat man's neck and lifted him into the air with ease. Although the fatty's body was huge, he was like a little chick in Xiao Chen's hands. Xiao Chen looked at the fatty coldly and said indifferently, "From now on, let me ask you. If you dare to lie, I'll make you unable to be a man for the rest of your life. Do you understand?" Xiao Chen's voice was very cold. The fat man felt his body tremble when he heard that. He subconsciously clamped his legs together and nodded repeatedly. He looked so pitiful that it was as if he had become a completely different person from before. Satisfied with Fatty's attitude, Xiao Chen asked, "What's your name?" "Big bro, my name is Godan," Fatty replied upon hearing Xiao Chen's words. "Gooden?" Hearing this, Xiao Chen's face darkened. He immediately threw a punch at the fatty's abdomen, causing him to spit out a mouthful of bitter water. The fatty's face turned pale as he screamed, "Big brother, why did you hit me?" "I already answered." "Humph, I'm asking for proof, not your nickname," Xiao Chen said coldly in response to Fatty's screams. "Godan, is this a human life?" Xiao Chen felt a chill in his heart. It seemed like this fatty still needed to be taught a lesson. Otherwise, he really wouldn't know how many eyes Ma Wangya had. Just as he was about to continue teaching the fatty a lesson, the next moment, the fatty actually burst into tears. Big bro, my name is really Godan. My surname is Li and my name is Godan. My full name is Li Godan. I didn't lie to you. Looking at the fatty's tears and snot, Xiao Qin was stunned. Could it be that this fellow is called Li Godan? But this name is too ridiculous. Is this the name your parents gave you? Xiao Qin asked. Yes, my father gave it to me. Li Godan nodded repeatedly. Then is your father your biological father? Are you sure you are his biological son? Hearing this, Xiao Qin asked again. Impossible, how could parents in this world give their son such a name? There was only one possibility, and that was that he wasn't their biological son. However, Xiao Qin was disappointed once again. Li Godan nodded firmly and replied, Big bro, I am naturally my father's biological son. How could this be fake? Talent. After hearing Li Godan's words, Xiao Qin felt that his father was definitely a talent. In that case, Xiao Qin did not continue to dwell on this issue and began to ask the next question. This Li Godan was completely an embroidered pillow. At this time, he was completely scared out of his wits by Xiao Qin, so in the face of Xiao Qin's questions, he basically told him everything he knew. Sometimes, he didn't even need Xiao Qin to continue asking. He was very intelligent. Li Godan's attitude satisfied Xiao Qin and saved him a lot of trouble. After some questioning, Xiao Qin had a rough idea in his heart. This Li Godan came from a stronghold called 8-Direction Stronghold, one of the 32 strongholds of Wind Mountain. What surprised Xiao Qin was that despite Li Godan's appearance, he was a genuine young master. At least in this 8-Direction Stronghold, he was the one and only little overlord. This was because Li Godan was the stronghold master of 8-Direction Stronghold and the only son of Li Fang, the sect master of 8-Direction sect. In 8-Direction Stronghold, Li Fang was recognized as the #1 expert with a cultivation base at the initial Dao Emperor realm. Li Godan was his only son, so naturally, no one dared to provoke him. He didn't expect Li Godan to have such an identity. However, looking at Li Godan's current appearance, Xiao Qin was unable to connect him with Li Fang. Putting aside his temperament, just his cultivation base, TSK, Li Godan was almost 40 years old this year, but he was only at the perfection Dao querying realm. This didn't make sense. Of course, Xiao Qin didn't know that Li Godan didn't possess any natural talent in cultivation. Moreover, Li Godan wasn't interested in cultivating. Coupled with the fact that the cultivation resources in Fengyue mountain range were scarce, even if Li Fang was a Dao Emperor realm expert, he was unable to gather too many cultivation resources for Li Godan because of the environment. As a wanted criminal, Li Fang couldn't go out to the outside world to look for cultivation resources for Li Godan. That was simply courting death. There was no doubt that as long as Li Fang dared to leave Wind Mountain Range, no matter whether he went to the Sky Wind Mansion or the Sky Moon Mansion, there would only be one result. He would be directly captured. Over the long years, except for a few forbidden areas in the Fengyue Mountains, the treasures of heaven and earth had almost all been plundered. Therefore, the cultivation illusion in the Fengyue Mountains could be said to be extremely difficult. Now that he knew Li Godan's identity, Xiao Qin casually tossed him aside. A plan suddenly appeared in his heart, and he walked over to Li Godan with a grin. Li Godan was extremely nervous when he saw Xiao Qin smile, and he spoke with a sobbing tone. Big brother, don't hit me anymore. I've already answered you, so don't hit me anymore. You want money, right? I have it here. As long as you don't hit me, everything in my spatial ring is yours. Li Godan immediately spoke nervously when he thought that Xiao Qin was going to kill him to keep his mouth shut. Xiao Qin spoke indifferently when he heard this. Don't be nervous, I don't want to hit you. My brother and I have just arrived at Wind Mountain Range, and it just so happens that we have fate with you. How about this? We'll follow by your side and make a living. You're the young master of 8 Direction Stronghold, so I believe it shouldn't be difficult for you to make arrangements for us, right? Li Godan was stunned when he heard Xiao Chen's words, and then he looked at Xiao Chen with a terrified expression. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 632. Li Godan had just beaten him up, and now he wanted to follow him. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Li Godan's brain couldn't process it for a while. Li Godan naturally didn't know that Xiao Chen had said this because of his identity. Knowing that Li Godan was the son of Li Fang, the chief of the octagonal stockade, Xiao Chen decided that Li Godan would be useful to him. After all, there was no news from the House of Forgotten Worries, so Xiao Chen needed to hide in the Fengyue Mountains for a while. If he could use Li Godan's name, Xiao Chen's identity would not be exposed. If Li Godan's identity was used well, he could do a lot of things. Combining the above reasons, Xiao Chen decided to use Li Godan's identity to hide in the Fengyue Mountains. Squatting down with a smile, Xiao Chen said to Li Godan, who had a look of confusion and fear, "How is it, Brother Godan? This matter shouldn't be difficult for you, right?" No, I just don't know what Big Brother wants to do with me. We need an identity, right?" Li Godan finally understood Xiao Chen's meaning, but if he wanted to join the 8 Direction gang, Xiao Chen and Li Godan must have an identity. In this regard, Li Godan was obviously scared and didn't dare to make any arrangements. Instead, he asked for Xiao Chen's opinion. Hearing Li Godan's words, Xiao Chen pondered for a moment, then his eyes flashed and he said with a smile. "You see, Brother Godan, as the young master of 8 Direction Stronghold, you don't even have 2 guards by your side. How about me and Brother Gu become your guards in the future?" After thinking about it, Xiao Chen felt that being Li Godan's personal guard was the most suitable. Firstly, he wouldn't have to interact with many people, so he only needed to be responsible for Li Godan's safety. Secondly, he wouldn't have to look at other people's faces. After all, a personal guard naturally only needed to listen to Li Godan's orders. Thirdly, it would be more convenient for Li Godan to do things for him. Unexpectedly, Li Godan didn't reject Xiao Chen's offer. He didn't even hesitate. He leaped up as if his injuries had completely healed. He looked at Xiao Chen and said excitedly, "Brother Xiao Chen, I'm going to take you to the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion." "Really? Big brother, are you telling the truth? Are you really willing to be my guard?" He didn't know what this guy was so excited about. He had just beaten him up. Now that he heard that he was going to be his guard, why was he so happy? Could it be that he was beaten silly? Xiao Chen was puzzled. Gu Lingyao also came to Xiao Chen's side and whispered into Xiao Chen's ear, "Big brother Xiao Chen, is there something wrong with this guy's brain? Is it okay for us to be his guard?" I don't know. Let's wait and see. If there's really something wrong with his brain, we'll think of another way." Hearing Gu Lingyao's words, Xiao Chen replied helplessly. After saying that, Xiao Chen looked at Li Godan again. This guy was already dancing with joy. Xiao Chen didn't know what to say about this. Because he didn't know Li Godan's character, Xiao Chen naturally didn't know that Li Godan didn't have a good life in 8 Direction Stockade. In 8 Direction Stockade, other than the stockade master, Li Fang, there were 2 deputy stockade masters. These 2 deputy stockade masters had great power. Coupled with Li Godan's character, even though he was the only son of Li Fang, he didn't have a good life. He was often bullied by others. Speaking of this, let's not talk about Li Godan's character. Since he was young, no one knew if Li Godan was stupid or naive. He never held a grudge and wouldn't use his father's identity to bully the weak. Although he would sometimes do some bad things, compared to the others in Fengyue Mountain Range, Li Godan was definitely a saint. His character was simple and gentle. Even if he was beaten, Li Godan would never complain to Li Fang. Because of this, over time, the others in 8 Direction Stockade didn't put Li Godan in their eyes. This wasn't strange. After all, what kind of people were in Fengyue Mountain Range? Facing these outlaws, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to make them obey the rules. It was already good enough that they didn't kill Li Guden directly. It was simply a fool's dream to expect them to obey Li Guden's orders. After being excited for a while, Li Guden gradually calmed down. Then, he quickly ran in front of Xiao Chen and asked anxiously, "Big brother, what you said just now is true. Are you really willing to be my personal bodyguard?" I should be willing." Hearing this, Xiao Chen felt uncertain. This fatty was so happy. Could it be that there was a problem? He nodded with uncertainty in his heart. Seeing this, Li Guden grabbed Xiao Chen's hand and said excitedly, "Good, with Big Brother here, they won't dare to bully me in the future. If anyone dares to bully me, I'll let Big Brother beat them up. Haha, Li Guden will finally be able to turn over a new leaf." Looking at Li Guden's excited expression, Xiao Chen didn't know if his choice was right or wrong. He felt uncertain in his heart. However, there was no better way now. He would just take it one step at a time. At worst, he would just run away. After all, he wouldn't be able to stay in Fengyue mountain range for long. With this thought in mind, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao walked towards 8-Direction Stockade under Li Guden's lead. 8-Direction Stockade wasn't far from here. Along the way, Li Guden also told Xiao Chen about his childhood. This guy didn't hold a grudge at all because of what happened just now. On the contrary, Xiao Chen was so enthusiastic that no one knew what to say. With Li Guden's narration, Xiao Chen had a basic understanding of this guy's character. Unknowingly, Xiao Chen felt that Li Guden was much more pleasing to the eye. Although he was a little stupid, a little simple, and a little naive, he wasn't a bad person at heart. He was even much better than those people in the outside world. Perhaps it was because of Li Guden's simple and weak character that caused him to be looked down upon in 8-Direction Stockade. Although he was the only son of the stockade master, his life was very difficult. His impression of Li Guden was much better. Xiao Chen also asked with a smile, "Li Guden, the people of 8-Direction Stockade bullied you like this. Why didn't you tell your father? Just let your father take action and teach them a lesson." Xiao Chen had been bullied since he was young, and the people in Octagon Stockade had even gotten worse. Xiao Chen was very curious as to why Li Guden had not told his father, Li Fang. After hearing Xiao Chen's words, the smile on Li Guden's face disappeared instantly. He revealed a firm expression and spoke as if he was a completely different person from before. "I don't want to embarrass my father. I'm his son. If I have to look for my father for everything, what will the people below think of my father? As the stockade master of 8-Direction Stockade, it's already difficult for him to control the people below him. If he acts because of me, 8-Direction Stockade will be in complete chaos. Big brother, you should know what kind of people are in Fengyue Mountain. I can't let my father become the target of public criticism because of my own matters. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 633. At this moment, Li Guden was like a completely different person. He didn't have that silly look anymore. The determination in his voice made Xiao Chen stunned. In order to not make things difficult for his father, Li Guden would never look for his father because of his own matters. He would rather be beaten and bullied than put his father in danger. This was Li Guden's true thoughts. How could you say that such a person was silly? At this moment, Xiao Chen seemed to have gained a new understanding of Li Guden. Perhaps this seemingly foolish fatty was not as foolish as he appeared to be. He also had his own perseverance, and he would endure silently for the sake of those who were important to him. Li Guden's words weren't an alarmist. He could even pat his chest and say that if Li Guden really looked for Li Fang for his own matters every few days, and Li Fang frequently stood up for Li Guden, then it wouldn't take long for Li Fang's doomsday to arrive. These villains in the Fengyue mountain range didn't have any rules in their hearts. If one wanted to become a leader here, one had to rely on strength. Naturally, the stronger one could become the leader. But at the same time, there were no restrictions, so it was very common for the subordinates to rebel against their superiors. Once Li Fong angered everyone because of Li Gudan's matter, one could imagine the consequences. Moreover, there were still 2 vice-chiefs in the 8-direction stronghold. Wouldn't they want to kill Li Fong and replace him? Therefore, even though Li Fong was the chief of the 8-direction stronghold, he was actually treading on thin ice. His subordinates were a group of demons who killed without spitting out the bone. If he wasn't careful, he might be devoured. Needless to say, he and Li Gudan would die without a burial place. It could be said that Li Gudan saw through everything very clearly. That was why he chose to endure. There was no other way. Other than enduring, what else could he do? He couldn't help but have a higher opinion of Li Gudan. After that, Xiao Chen asked Li Gudan and his father how they came to the Fengyue mountain range. In the face of Xiao Chen's inquiry, Li Gudan didn't hide anything and answered truthfully. When Li Gudan was just born, Li Gudan's family was still living in Tianyue Prefecture. Moreover, they were doing quite well. Li Fong held a position in the local city lord's mansion as a commander. However, the good times didn't last long. Because of a coincidence, the young master of the city lord's mansion took a fancy to Li Gudan's mother and used some underhanded methods to forcefully possess her. After that, because Li Gudan's mother was ashamed and too ashamed to face Li Fong, she committed suicide. After knowing about this, Li Fong was naturally heartbroken. Without saying anything, he furiously killed that young master from the city lord's mansion. However, in this way Li Fong naturally made a big mistake and was wanted. He had no choice but to hide in the Tianyue Prefecture for several years. After countless life-and-death escapes, Li Fong had no choice but to enter the Fengyue mountain range with Doggy Li and stayed there for several decades. Li Gudan was very clearly aware that if it wasn't for him, his father wouldn't have fled at all, nor would his father be able to continue living in this world. It was precisely because of him that Li Fong acted like a vicious dog and tried every possible means to survive. Moreover, this sort of survival wasn't for himself but for Li Gudan. As his father, Li Fong's thoughts were very simple, and it was to allow Li Gudan to continue living. When he heard Li Gudan talk about their family, Xiao Chen sighed lightly. At the same time, he silently made a decision in his heart. Once this matter was over, he would bring both of them back to Tianfeng Xingzhou. With Xiao Chen's identity, it wasn't difficult for him to do this. Moreover, Li Fong was a Dao Emperor realm expert. It couldn't be any easier for him to become a powerless deacon in Tianfeng Xingzhou. As for Li Gudan, it might be a little difficult for him to become a disciple of Tianfeng Xingzhou, but it wouldn't be a problem for him to go to the Tianqi sect. Even Li Fong could go to the Tianqi sect to become an elder. It was much better than staying in Tianfeng Xingzhou. Xiao Chen secretly decided in his heart, but he didn't say it out loud. As they chatted along the way, the 3 of them finally arrived at the Octagon stronghold. From afar, the Octagon stronghold looked like a stronghold built in a ravine. The surroundings were casually piled up with stones to form a short wall. At the same time, a small city gate was wide open. Through the city gate, one could see the situation in the Octagon stronghold. It was muddy and not paved with limestone. Simple wooden houses were scattered randomly in the stronghold. Big brother Xiao Chen, let's go. Along the way, Li Gudan also got to know Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen nodded slightly when he heard his words. Then, the 3 of them strode into the Octagon stronghold. Along the way, Xiao Chen felt that the Octagon stronghold was dirty, messy, and poor. Dirty was unhygienic. Filth could be seen everywhere in the stronghold. Moreover, it was mixed in the muddy street. Waves of foul stench drifted with the wind. It was simply like a rat's nest. Moreover, not only was the environment and hygiene extremely poor, but Xiao Chen had already seen no less than 10 fights after just walking through one street. These fights weren't ordinary fights that stopped after a certain point. It was a true life and death fight. If there was a disagreement, they would fight with blades in hand. At the same time, not only were there battles everywhere, corpses were everywhere as well. Every 10 meters or so on the street one could see corpses lying on the ground. No one cared about them, and no one collected them. They were just left to lie there and rot, to the point where they became one with the mud. Gu Lingyao didn't seem to be used to the environment of the Octagon stronghold. She just followed beside Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen silently squeezed her little hand gently, indicating that she didn't need to be too nervous. Along the way, the people on both sides of the street looked at Xiao Chen and Li Guden with unfriendly expressions. Their eyes were like looking at prey. Without a doubt, if Li Guden wasn't beside them, these guys would have already surrounded Xiao Chen and Li Guden. Unfamiliar faces were like sheep in the Fengyue mountain range. Xiao Chen didn't care about these people's stares. He had secretly observed the cultivation of these guys. Basically, none of them had surpassed the Tao validation realm, so they couldn't be considered as experts. However, what surprised Xiao Chen was that the population of the Octagon stronghold was a little shocking. The street that they had just walked through was almost packed with people. The density of the population was so high that it wasn't inferior to the big cities in the outside world. He was a little shocked, but he soon found the answer to his shock. Under Li Guden's lead, Xiao Chen and the other two came to the center of the Octagon stronghold. It was a completely different world from the outer area that they had just passed through. The ground was no longer littered with corpses, and the air was no longer filled with an unbearable stench. Even the streets were paved with simple bluestone flooring. Compared to the outer area, this place could be called heaven. Please add it to your collection, monthly vote, recommend it. End of this chapter. Chapter 634. The outer zone and the central zone of 8-direction stockade were two completely different worlds. Li Guden patiently explained to Xiao Chen. There were a total of 32 human stockades in the Wind-Moon mountain range. The rules of these stockades were the same. Those who were weak and had no connections could only live in the outer zone. According to Li Guden's words, these people were worse than dogs. As for the central area, that was where the leaders of the stronghold and those with high cultivation lived. The environment and conditions there were naturally incomparable to those in the outer area. There were close to 10,000 people in 8-direction stockade. However, there were more than 8,000 people living in the outer zone, while only 1,000 people lived in the central zone. Moreover, the central zone was much larger than the outer zone. In other words, there were fewer people standing in a larger area while more people could only hide in the small outer zone. This naturally led to such a situation. In the eyes of the people in the central zone, the people in the outer zone were worse than dogs. Therefore, they only deserved to live in a filthy place. People were always divided into different classes. This was just like nature. As long as there were people, it would be like this. However, in the Wind-Moon mountain range, the division of classes was more direct and violent. Xiao Chen naturally did not think too much about this. Pity those people? Perhaps there was, but what could he do? Xiao Chen was not a saint. He walked all the way to Li Guden's residence. However, just as he crossed a street, two young men who were about the same age as Li Guden walked towards him. When they saw Li Guden, a cold smile appeared on their faces. Then, they strode towards Li Guden and spoke condescendingly. "Guden, give us some spiritual stones to spend. We are short of money recently." They asked for spiritual stones without any hesitation. Hearing this, Li Guden hesitated. Spiritual stones were definitely the most important thing in the Wind-Moon mountain range. Seeing Li Guden's hesitation, the other person shouted coldly, "Li Guden, do you want to die? We're just lending you some spirit stones to spend. What's the meaning of this? Hurry up and hand them over. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite." Looking at the two guys, it was obvious that this was not the first time they had robbed Li Guden. Xiao Chen, who was watching coldly from the side, took a step forward and asked Li Guden, "Brother Go, who are these two?" In front of outsiders, Xiao Chen was Li Guden's guard, so he naturally called him Brother Gooden. Hearing Xiao Chen's words and seeing Xiao Chen constantly giving him meaningful looks, Li Gooden was not hopelessly stupid. He quickly remembered Xiao Chen's instructions on the way here, so he put on an act and said, "Humph, these two fellows are called Wu Jiang and Wu Hai. They're members of our Octagon gang." Hearing Li Gooden's words, Xiao Chen didn't speak, but Wu Hai was the first to speak. He grabbed Li Gooden's collar and coldly shouted, "Li Gooden, you've grown a temper. Why? Did you bring back 2 lackeys after a trip? Unfamiliar faces, did you just enter the Fengyue mountain range? It just so happens that us 2 brothers are a little short of money recently. The 3 of you take out all the spirit stones you have. If you dare to hide even a single spirit stone, we brothers will break your legs." Saying that, Wu Hai coldly glanced at Xiao Chen. He guessed that Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao should be newcomers. After all, he hadn't seen them before. Looking at the 2 of them, he guessed that they should have been subdued by Li Gooden. He sneered in his heart. These 2 idiots, he didn't know how they were tricked by Li Gooden. They actually followed him, they were simply courting death. Hearing Wu Hai's words, a trace of panic flashed in Li Gooden's eyes. However, Xiao Chen indifferently said, "I advise you to take your hand away. Don't dirty our brother Gooden's clothes. Otherwise, even if we kill you, it won't be enough to compensate." "Haha, is this guy crazy? Li Gooden, it seems that your 2 lackeys are the same as you. There's something wrong with their brains." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Wu Jiang laughed loudly. He knew what kind of character Li Gooden was, so naturally, Wu Hai and Wu Jiang didn't take Xiao Chen seriously. If he was a capable person, why would he take a fancy to a guy like Li Gooden? They didn't put Xiao Chen in their eyes at all. However, in the next second, Wu Hai and Wu Jiang regretted it. Because Xiao Chen attacked. Without saying a word, Xiao Chen directly threw a punch at Wu Hai. Seeing this, Wu Jiang coldly shouted, "Kid, you're courting death." Saying that, the 3 of them began to fight. Of course, such a battle couldn't be said to be fierce, because it was completely one-sided. The 2 brothers, Wu Jiang and Wu Hai, were both at the minor perfection Dao confirmation realm. In terms of cultivation realm, they were higher than Xiao Chen. However, in front of a direct disciple of the sage sect like Xiao Chen, what was the use of cultivation realm? Unless they were 1 or 2 realms higher than Xiao Chen, they could completely suppress Xiao Chen with the advantage of cultivation realm. Otherwise, a difference of 2 or 3 realms was useless. Of course, there was another possibility, and that was that the 2 brothers, Wu Hai and Wu Jiang, had also reached the level of a direct disciple of the sage sect like Xiao Chen. In that case, they could fight with Xiao Chen on the same level. Unfortunately, the 2 brothers were not such people. They were just ordinary warriors, and there was nothing special about their combat strength. Therefore, the result was needless to say. In just a few dozen breaths, the 2 of them had been beaten up by Xiao Chen to the point that they couldn't stand up. With the tempered battle body, Xiao Chen's strength was extraordinary. Even those body-refining warriors were no match for Xiao Chen in terms of strength. Lying on the ground, they didn't even have the strength to cry out. Looking down at the 2 brothers, Xiao Chen said lightly, "Kowtow to Brother Guzi and admit your mistake. Give me 200 mid-grade primordial stones, and I'll let this matter go. Otherwise, I'm afraid you 2 brothers won't see the sun tomorrow." Saying that, a faint murderous intent flashed in Xiao Chen's eyes. Seeing this, the 2 brothers didn't dare to hesitate. They got up and crawled in front of Li Gooden. Each of them hugged one of Li Gooden's feet, snot and tears flying everywhere. Brother Guzi, we were wrong. We were really wrong. Please forgive us, Brother Guzi." In the past, the 2 brothers, Wu Hai and Wu Jiang, bullied Li Gooden a lot, but now they were kneeling in front of Li Gooden like dogs, crying and complaining. Their appearance made Li Gooden blush with shame. Standing aside and watching coldly, Xiao Chen was not surprised by the actions of the 2 brothers. People like them were originally strong and bullied the weak. When they met someone weaker than them, they were arrogant, but when they met someone stronger than them, they immediately became cowards. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. End of this chapter. Chapter 635. He easily dealt with the two brothers, Wu Jiang and Wu Hai. In the face of their cries, Li Guden viciously let out a sigh of relief. He punched and kicked the two brothers, and in the end, he directly took 500 mid-grade spirit stones from them. Only then did the three of them swagger off. After teaching the two brothers a lesson, Li Guden was in a good mood. Along the way, he kept thanking Xiao Chen and even declared that he would drink with Xiao Chen until they were drunk. In the face of Li Guden's excitement, Xiao Chen did not say anything and just smiled. He understood Li Guden's current mood. A person who had been bullied all year round could finally hold his head high. This kind of feeling must be very exciting. Under Li Guden's lead, the three of them quickly arrived at his residence. It had to be said that as the only son of the eight-direction stockades Li Fang, Li Guden's residence was indeed not bad. In this aspect, Li Guden was much better than the others. It was a small courtyard with a single door and courtyard. The environment was not very good and there were no decorations. It was indeed nothing compared to the outside world. However, in the Fengyue mountain range, such a courtyard was already very impressive. In the entire eight-direction stockade, there were not many people who could own such a small courtyard. After pushing open the door, Li Guden warmly invited Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao in. He looked around the small courtyard. It was not big and there were only 4 or 5 rooms. However, it was enough for Xiao Chen and the other two. Li Guden's residence did not have a maid's uniform. After all, this was the Fengyue mountain range. There was no place to find a maid. Those who came here were all vicious people. It was simply wishful thinking to expect them to be maids. Li Guden first invited Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao to sit in the main hall. Then, he quickly ran to the kitchen and personally prepared the ingredients for the three of them. Li Guden was really used to living alone. He was very familiar with cooking. Therefore, it did not take long for him to prepare 7 or 8 dishes. The only thing worth praising was the pot of meat stew. This was the meat of a demonic beast that was hunted by the Ba Fong gang. Unfortunately, it was only a low-level demonic beast. In the Fengyue mountain range, what people ate the most was demonic beast meat. After all, this was a continuous mountain range. Demonic beasts hunted humans, and humans hunted demonic beasts as well. The dishes were ready. Next, Li Guden took out a jar of good wine that he had kept for a long time. Although it was a good wine, it was just an ordinary wine in the outside world. He personally poured a glass of wine for Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao. Then, Li Guden took the lead and said, "Big brother Xiao Chen, thank you so much for today. I, Li Guden, would like to propose a toast to you." Today, Xiao Chen had stood up for him. Regarding this, Li Guden's heart was naturally clean. This guy was just that naive. As he spoke, Li Guden had already finished his glass in one gulp. Seeing this, Xiao Chen smiled and also finished his glass. After drinking a glass of wine, the three of them began to eat and drink. Of course, most of the time, Xiao Chen and Li Guden were drinking. As for Gu Lingyao, he only took a small sip each time. Gu Lingyao did not like wine, so he naturally drank less. The atmosphere was quite lively, mainly because of Li Guden. At this moment, it was as if he had opened a clip and could not stop talking. He chatted with Xiao Chen randomly. As they chatted and drank, the sky unknowingly darkened. At this time, Li Guden was obviously a little drunk. Perhaps because he was happy, Li Guden did not use his spiritual energy to refine the wine. Therefore, at this time, Li Guden's face was flushed red, and he was slurring his words. However, it was also because of the alcohol that Li Guden finally spilled the beans in front of Xiao Chen. Sitting next to Xiao Chen, Li Guden said emotionally, "Big brother Xiao Chen, it's great. Being able to meet you is really a blessing that I, Li Guden, have cultivated for several lifetimes. Today, Today, when Big Brother beat up Wu Jiang and Wu Hai Big Brother, you know what I was thinking? At that time, I felt as if a big stone in my heart had been lifted. My whole body became relaxed. Li Guden kept talking. Regarding this, Xiao Chen was also quite helpless. Looking at the sky, it was already late. In the end, Xiao Chen had no choice but to directly knock Li Guden out and carry him out of the hall. He personally sent Li Guden back to his room. After that, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao also returned to their rooms to rest. In the Wind Moon Mountain Range, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao naturally could not sleep in the same room. After returning to his room, Xiao Chen circulated the spiritual energy in his body. In the blink of an eye, his body was completely refined. Sitting on the bed, Xiao Chen began to cultivate. After a silent night, Xiao Chen woke up early the next morning. As usual, he cultivated for a while in the courtyard. Because there was still no news from the Forgotten Worries restaurant, Xiao Chen could not make a move yet. He could only wait patiently. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed in the 8-direction stockade. During these 3 days, the 3 Tao emperors sent by the family Nangong had also arrived. Xiao Chen secretly met with them and had them settle down near the 8-direction stockade while waiting for their next move. He did not expose the identities of the 3 family Nangong. After all, who knew if there were any spies of the Qingma gang in the 8-direction stockade? The days seemed to have returned to normal. Although the power was in the Wind Moon Mountain Range, Xiao Chen enjoyed a rare moment of peace in Li Guden's small courtyard. This was very normal. Xiao Chen basically did not go out. For some reason, Li Guden had actually started to cultivate with Xiao Chen. Regarding this, Xiao Chen did not say much and imparted some of his cultivation experiences to Li Guden. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. On this night, Xiao Chen was cultivating with his eyes closed. However, at this moment, the door to his room was gently pushed open. At the same time, Xiao Chen, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed, suddenly opened his eyes. An ordinary-looking middle-aged man stood in the room. His gaze was calm and indifferent as he looked at Xiao Chen. When their eyes met, the middle-aged man took the lead and bowed. "Greetings, young master. I am a member of the Forgotten Worries restaurant's Dark Hall. I am here on the orders of the hall master." The middle-aged man took the initiative to reveal his identity. Then, he took out Su Jin's token from his storage ring and handed it to Xiao Chen to prove his words. After confirming the middle-aged man's identity, Xiao Chen said indifferently, "You have news about the Qingma gang? Since Su Jin sent someone here, there should be news about the Qingma gang." Sure enough, when he heard Xiao Chen's words, the middle-aged man nodded slightly. "Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 636. Xiao Chen's eyes glinted when he saw the middle-aged man nodding. "Tell me quickly." The Forgotten Worries restaurant had really just found out. One must know that the Nangong family had yet to find any traces of the Green Horse Gang, but the Forgotten Worries restaurant already had clues. It could be seen that the Forgotten Worries restaurant's intelligence system was much stronger than the Nangong family's. All the major forces in the south of the Tianfeng prefecture had completely underestimated the Forgotten Worries restaurant. They only thought that the Forgotten Worries restaurant was just a place of romance. Who would have thought that the Forgotten Worries restaurant had such a powerful intelligence system? Hearing Xiao Chen's question, the middle-aged man did not hesitate. Before coming here, Su Jin had told him that there was no need to hide anything from Xiao Chen. Whatever Xiao Chen asked, the middle-aged man answered honestly. "Young master, we have indeed found the whereabouts of the Qingma gang. We have also confirmed that the disciples of the Tianfeng Xingzong and Miss Nangong Yen are not in danger. They are still alive. But not only did they find the whereabouts of the Qingma gang, but they also confirmed the safety of the disciples of the Tianfeng Xingzong and Nangong Yen." Xiao Chen was naturally elated. However, when he heard the middle-aged man's last sentence and saw the awkward expression on his face, Xiao Chen sharply sensed something and asked in a deep voice. But what? But according to the current intelligence, this matter might be related to the Tianyue sacred sect. Before the Qingma gang kidnapped Miss Nangong Yen and her group, we secretly learned that the leader of the Qingma gang, Zhao Chang, had secretly met with people from the Tianyue sacred sect. A few days later, the Qingma gang kidnapped Miss Nangong Yen and her group. The middle-aged man replied truthfully to Xiao Chen's question. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chen fell into silence. Tianyue sacred sect. Could it be that the Qingma gang kidnapped Nangong Yen and her group under the orders of the Tianyue sacred sect? If that was the case, it would be strange. He didn't expect the Tianyue sacred sect to be involved. If it was just the Qingma gang, there was nothing to be afraid of. However, if the Tianyue sacred sect was involved, then it would be troublesome. After all, the Tianyue sacred sect's strength wasn't inferior to the Tianfeng Xingzong. Most importantly, why would the Tianyue sacred sect kidnap Nangong Yen and her group? After the kidnapping, they didn't mention any conditions and didn't kill Nangong Yen and Nangong Yan's group. It had been almost half a month since the Nangong Yen and her group were kidnapped. However, according to the information from Wang Yulu, the Nangong Yen and her group were still safe. In other words, the Qingma gang, or the people behind the Qingma gang, didn't want the Nangong Yen and her group's lives. This was strange. If they didn't want money or lives, then why did they kidnap Nangong Yen and her group? Xiao Chen pondered in his heart, but he couldn't find any clues. After a while, he couldn't think of any big possibilities. He could only raise his head and ask the middle-aged man, "Can you find out who the person from the Tianyue sacred sect who was in contact with Zhao Chang is?" Currently, they only knew that Zhao Chang had been in contact with people from the Tianyue sacred sect, but they didn't know who it was. Facing Xiao Chen's inquiry, the middle-aged man shook his head helplessly. "I'm afraid not in the short term. Unless we can capture Zhao Chang alive and ask him about the identity of this person, there's no other way. That person from the Tianyue sacred sect is very cautious and didn't leave any clues." Even Wang Yulu couldn't find out the identity of that person from the Tianyue sacred sect. Xiao Chen could only sigh helplessly. Xiao Chen had a faint intuition that this matter wasn't as simple as it seemed. Behind the seemingly simple kidnapping, there might be some hidden motive. However, other than the Qingma gang, he didn't have any clues. After a moment of silence, Xiao Chen stood up and bowed to the middle-aged man. "Many thanks. I'll have to trouble you to pass a message to your hall master. Tell him that we thank Wang Yulu for helping us this time. If there's anything you need help with in the future, your hall master can look for me. I won't refuse." "Of course. I'll take my leave first." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the middle-aged man returned a bow and then left in a flash. His movement technique was indeed good. Seeing the middle-aged man leave, Xiao Chen's brows furrowed again. That night, he found Gu Lingyao and truthfully told her the information he had obtained from Wang Yulu. Hearing that there was the shadow of the Tianyue sacred sect behind this, Gu Lingyao and Xiao Chen both frowned. However, without any clues, even Gu Lingyao couldn't guess what the Tianyue sacred sect wanted to do. In the end, after a round of discussion, the two of them decided to temporarily ignore the Tianyue sacred sect's motive. The most important thing was to rescue the Nangong Yen and the others. Moreover, the Nangong Yen might know something. Perhaps they would be able to find out the Tianyue sacred sect's motive after rescuing the Nangong Yen. Even if they didn't know, rescuing the Nangong Yen and the others was the main objective of this mission. As for other matters, they could put them aside for now. After making the decision, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao prepared to leave immediately. After staying in 8-Direction Stockade for 3 days, they originally planned to use Li Gudan's identity to do some things. However, it seemed that there was no need for that now. The Wang Yulu was very efficient. Taking advantage of the night, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao left 8-Direction Stockade. However, before leaving, Xiao Chen left a letter for Li Guden. The content was very simple. Brother Guden, I have something to do. I will leave first. We will definitely meet again in the future. Don't worry. He didn't disturb Li Guden. Of course, when Xiao Chen said that they would meet again, he would take Li Guden and his father away from the Fengyue Mountains after solving the problem of the Nangong Yen and the others. After getting along with each other for a few days, Xiao Chen was sure that Li Guden wasn't a bad person. Such a person didn't belong to the Fengyue Mountains. Since they were fated to meet and he had the ability, he naturally had to lend a helping hand. Xiao Chen was not a compassionate person, and he would never talk about helping the world and saving people. There were only two reasons why he helped Li Guden. Firstly, Li Guden wasn't a bad person. On the contrary, he was very naive. Xiao Chen liked such a person very much. Secondly, it was probably fate. It was fate that he was able to meet Li Guden in the Fengyue Mountains. Since they were fated to meet, then what harm was there in lending a helping hand? Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao left. They found the 3 Dao Emperor Realm experts of the family Nangong outside 8 Direction Stockade and told them about what had happened. The group of them rushed towards the Qingma gang's secret base. After a night of silence, Li Guden saw the letter Xiao Chen left for him when he arrived at the main hall early in the morning. A wisp of sorrow flashed through Li Guden's eyes as he silently read the contents of the letter. However, he quickly returned to normal. Xiao Chen said that they would meet again. Li Guden chose to believe in Xiao Chen. Since they would meet again, then what was there to be sad about? Please add this letter to your collection. Please recommend it. Chapter 637. While Li Guden was reading Xiao Chen's letter, on the other side, Xiao Chen's group had already left the 8-Direction stronghold and were rushing towards another stronghold called the Hungry Tiger Stronghold. According to the information provided by the Forgotten Worries restaurant, the Qingma gang was currently hiding in a valley not far from the Hungry Tiger stronghold. It was an unknown valley. Due to the rugged path and the fact that there was nothing special about it, very few people would go there. Therefore, after kidnapping the Nangong Yen group, the Qingma gang had been hiding there. The 3 Dao emperors sent by the family Nangong were members of the family Nangong. At the same time, the 3 of them were rather familiar with the Fengyue mountain range. Therefore, when Xiao Chen mentioned the Qingma gang's hiding place, the 3 of them immediately knew where it was. As they hurried, one of the family Nangong Dao emperors said with a cold expression, "The Qingma gang really knows how to hide under the radar. That valley is less than an hour's journey from the Hungry Tiger stronghold. No wonder the family Nangong couldn't find them." The Green Horse gang's choice of hiding place was indeed unexpected. After all, they had kidnapped the young miss of the Nangong family. According to normal people's thinking, they would definitely run as far away as possible. It was absolutely impossible for them to continue staying near the walled city. After all, in the 32 strongholds of Fengyue, as long as the Nangong clan did a little investigation, they could easily find them. Therefore, no one would have thought that the Green Horse gang would actually stay around the Hungry Tiger stronghold. There was a ball of rage burning in their hearts. Or perhaps it was because the Nangong clan was unable to find the whereabouts of the Azure Horse gang after investigating for so long, yet the Worry Forget restaurant had accomplished it in a short period of a few days. They felt like they'd lost face, so these 3 Dao Emperor Realm experts of the Nangong clan were extremely displeased. As the number 1 power in the southern region of the Tianfeng prefecture, the family Nangong were all proud and arrogant. Therefore, this matter had indeed made them extremely angry. Xiao Chen grinned and didn't say anything further. However, a wisp of a solemn expression couldn't help but appear in his eyes. Actually, since they'd traveled here last night until now, based on the current situation, it could be said to be extremely easy for these 3 Dao Emperor Realm experts sent by the Nangong clan to annihilate the Azure Horse gang and rescue Nangong Yan's group. However, for some unknown reason, Xiao Chen felt slightly uneasy. He kept having the feeling that this trip wouldn't go so smoothly. However, no matter how he thought about it, how could the lowly Qingma gang deal with the 3 Dao emperors of the family Nangong? After all, the Qingma gang's leader, Zhao Chang, was only at the peak of the Dao validation realm. It was like trying to break a rock with an egg. However, even so, Xiao Chen felt that something was amiss. He couldn't find a reason or evidence, so Xiao Chen was secretly pondering whether he had missed any clues or questions. Unfortunately, no matter how Xiao Chen thought about it, he couldn't think of any other possibility. For the sake of not alerting the enemy, Xiao Chen's group didn't fly, and they relied on their legs to travel. However, even then, they arrived outside the Starving Tiger's stronghold in less than 2 days after traveling without stopping. As he gazed at the Starving Tiger's stronghold that was similar in scale to the 8-direction stronghold, Xiao Chen said to the 3 family Nangong experts at the side, "Seniors, there's no need for us to enter the Starving Tiger's stronghold. We've been causing trouble all this time, so we'd like to rest for a while. We've exhausted quite a bit of energy from traveling for 2 days, so we'll head out to rescue young Miss Nangong and the others after we've adjusted our state." Originally, Xiao Chen and the others were completely capable of making a move upon arriving here. However, they'd exhausted quite a bit of energy from traveling at full speed for almost 2 days. Moreover, Xiao Chen kept having a bad premonition in his heart. So, Xiao Chen decided to adjust his state before making a move. For the sake of safety, Xiao Chen chose to rest. The 3 family Nangong experts immediately expressed their displeasure when they heard this, and one of them even grunted coldly. "Humph! What's there to rest for? With the 3 of us here, you don't even have to make a move. The 3 of us can annihilate the Qingma gang with a flip of our hands and rescue the young Mississippi." The 3 of them didn't take the Qingma gang seriously at all. It made sense because would 3 Dao Emperor Realm experts care about a tiny Qingma gang? However, the current situation was different. So, Xiao Chen still insisted on resting and adjusting his state while facing their displeasure, and they couldn't act rashly. Even though the 3 family Nangong experts were displeased by Xiao Chen's persistence, they still chose to compromise in the end. It couldn't be helped. Before they came here, Nangong Yi and his older brother, the patriarch of family Nangong, had given them strict orders that they had to obey Xiao Chen. If they dared to disobey, then they would be punished according to the rules of the clan. They had to obey Xiao Chen's orders. So, the 3 family Nangong experts followed Xiao Chen's instructions and chose a spacious area to sit down cross-legged before closing their eyes and adjusting their state of breathing. They were supposed to be able to adjust their state of breathing in 2 to 4 hours, but Xiao Chen didn't make a move for a long time. The 3 family Nangong experts continued to endure when they saw this, and Xiao Chen finally stood up slowly when night fell. "Seniors, let's go." They could finally make a move. The 3 of them grunted coldly at the same time when they heard this, and then they didn't say anything else as they followed Xiao Chen towards the valley where the Qingma gang resided. Xiao Chen knew that the 3 of them were displeased with him, but he didn't have the slightest intention of complying with them. As they got closer to the Qingma gang's hiding place, Xiao Chen's ominous premonition grew stronger and stronger. Xiao Chen's eyes flickered with a faint light as he asked Gu Lingyao softly, "Lingyao, did you notice anything amiss?" Xiao Chen had already witnessed Gu Lingyao's monstrous intelligence, so he took the initiative to ask her if she noticed anything amiss. However, to Xiao Chen's disappointment, Gu Lingyao shook her head in response to his question, indicating that she didn't notice anything amiss. Xiao Chen was clearly helpless in response to Gu Lingyao's answer, and he guessed inwardly, "Could it be that I'm overthinking things? Could it be that I'm overthinking things?" However, Xiao Chen quickly shook his head again. "That's impossible, my intuition can't be wrong." Ever since the heavenly Chen continent, Xiao Chen had always had this intuition whenever danger approached. His intuition couldn't be wrong. He firmly believed that his intuition couldn't be wrong, but he still didn't know where the danger was coming from. When the group arrived at the entrance of the valley, Xiao Chen, who had been hiding in the dark, quickly discovered that there were at least 8 hidden sentries at the entrance of the valley. These sentries were used to observe every movement in the surroundings. It seems that Forgotten Worries Restaurant's intelligence was correct. The Qingma gang was indeed hiding here. Xiao Chen didn't act rashly, but the 3 family Nangong experts couldn't help but speak up. Young Master Xiao Chen, what happened to you along the way? Could it be that you were scared out of your wits by the Qingma gang? Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 638. The family Nangong experts' tone was filled with dissatisfaction. It was obvious that the 3 of them were infuriated by Xiao Chen's actions along the way. From the 3 of them's point of view, since they already knew where the Qingma gang was hiding, they should just charge in and kill them. However, Xiao Chen was being extremely careful. It was as if he was afraid of the Qingma gang. They were already at the entrance of the valley, but Xiao Chen still had no intention of attacking. He was still observing his surroundings. This caused the 3 family Nangong experts to explode with anger. In the face of the family Nangong experts' questioning, Xiao Chen replied without batting an eyelid. Even a lion would use all its strength to hunt a rabbit. The 3 family Nangong experts were furious when they heard Xiao Chen's word. However, they didn't know how to refute him. After all, Xiao Chen's actions weren't wrong. They only felt that Xiao Chen was too cowardly. A mere Qingma gang had scared him to this extent. They couldn't help but look at Xiao Chen with disdain. Xiao Chen didn't care what the 3 of them were thinking. They naturally didn't realize that something was wrong. Xiao Chen did not care about the sullen 3 masters of the Nangong family. He hid in the dark and observed for more than an hour, but he did not find anything out of the ordinary. Other than the hidden guards, everything else was normal. He didn't find anything suspicious. In the end, after careful planning, Xiao Chen decided to let the 3 family Nangong experts feign a frontal attack while he and Gu Lingyao sneaked into the valley to find an opportunity to rescue the Nangong Yen group. It didn't matter what the Qingma gang had prepared or what tricks they had up their sleeve. The arrow was already nocked on the bowstring. They had no choice but to release it. If the 3 family Nangong experts feigned a frontal attack, and the Qingma gang really did have some tricks up their sleeves, they could buy time for Xiao Chen to rescue them. However, if the Qingma gang didn't have any tricks up their sleeves, everything would just be his wishful thinking. That would be even better. They could directly attack and destroy the Qingma gang. Xiao Chen's plan was to use the 3 family Nangong experts as bait. No matter how the Qingma gang reacted, the 3 of them would bear the brunt of the attack. Don't think that Xiao Chen's plan was familiar. There was no other choice. Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao weren't strong enough to act as bait. If the Qingma gang really did have some tricks up their sleeves, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao would be doomed. Xiao Chen briefly explained the plan to the 3 of them. It was very simple. Xiao Chen only had one sentence for the 3 of them, and that was to attack head-on. Naturally, the 3 of them didn't refuse. In fact, they were excited. However, the contempt in their eyes towards Xiao Chen deepened. One of them scoffed. Young Master Xiao Chen should have done this long ago. The 2 of you should rest here first. The 3 of us will be able to rescue young Miss and destroy the Qingma gang in no time. There was an undisguised arrogance in their words. Xiao Chen did not say anything about it. He shook his head slightly and did not argue with the 3 of them. The 3 of them thought that Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao wouldn't dare to fight the Qingma gang. So, they didn't stay any longer. Their figures soared into the sky as soon as they finished speaking. The auras of Dao Emperors instantly erupted. They didn't continue concealing their track. When faced with the sudden appearance of 3 great figures at the Dao Emperor realm, the Azure Horse Gang's hidden guards that were in charge of guarding the entrance of the gorge directly panicked. However, in just an instant, the 3 experts of the Nangong clan made a move, and they eliminated all the hidden guards with a flip of their hands. Xiao Chen, who was still hidden in the shadows, shouted softly as he watched the scouts being eliminated one by one. Ling Yao, let's go. Xiao Chen didn't tell the three family Nangong experts about his and Gu Lingyao's plan, so they were naturally able to charge into the valley with ease due to the chaos. The sudden change in events had naturally alarmed the Qingma gang within the valley. In next to no time, a middle-aged man led over 100 people into the sky. He was the leader of the Qingma gang, Zhao Chong. A wisp of surprise and bewilderment flashed through Zhao Chong's eyes as he gazed at the three family Nangong experts, but it quickly dispersed. At the same time, the three family Nangong experts naturally noticed Zhao Chong as well, and one of them laughed coldly. Zhao Chong, today will be the day you and the Qingma gang are annihilated. They were absolutely confident in their ability to annihilate the Qingma gang, but the three of them hadn't noticed that besides the surprise and bewilderment in the beginning, there wasn't a trace of panic in Zhao Chong's eyes at all. Logically speaking, it was impossible for Zhao Chong, who was only at the perfection stage of the Dao validation realm, to be so calm when facing three Dao emperors unless he had some sort of trump card up his sleeve. Sure enough, Zhao Chong spoke unhurriedly when he heard the family Nangong's cold shout. Looks like your family Nangong really does have some ability. You were actually able to find this place. But so what? Do you think the three of you will be able to rescue the Nangong Yen and the others today? He was extremely calm and didn't panic at all. As soon as Zhao Chong finished speaking, three Dao Emperor Realm auras shot into the sky from the depths of the valley as well. After that, three rays of light flashed by, and then three middle-aged men at the Dao Emperor Realm appeared in midair before Zhao Chong. There are three Dao Emperor Realm experts hidden in the Qingma gang. As soon as the three of them appeared, Xiao Chen, who was going deeper and deeper into the valley with Gu Lingyao, suddenly stopped moving, and he looked towards the distant sky as he muttered softly to himself. As expected, the Qingma gang really did have trump cards up their sleeve. Xiao Chen's intuition wasn't wrong. As he gazed at the six Dao Emperor Realm experts who stood opposite each other in midair, Xiao Chen didn't know if the three members of the family Nangong would be able to win. Fortunately, Xiao Chen was prepared. So long as the three members of the family Nangong were able to buy time, then Xiao Chen might be able to rescue the Nangong Yen and the others. After a short moment of surprise and bewilderment, Xiao Chen shouted to Gu Lingyao, "Let's go. There's not much time left." As he spoke, Xiao Chen continued charging into the valley. At the same time, the three members of the family Nangong were first stunned when they saw the three Dao Emperors in the sky outside the valley, but their gazes instantly locked onto the chests of the three Dao Emperors. They could clearly see the embroidery on their chests, and the embroidery had the words Beiming on it. Their expressions became slightly strange, and the three members of the family Nangong said with slightly gloomy expressions, "The Beiming clan of the Tianyue prefecture. All of you are from the Beiming clan?" "Yes, friends of the family Nangong. I think all of you should head back first. Don't worry, we won't harm young Miss Nangong Yen. Once the time is up, we'll naturally arrange for someone to send her back to the family Nangong. I guarantee that she won't be harmed at all." The three Dao Emperor Realm experts of the Beiming clan weren't surprised that their identities had been recognized, and the person in the lead even spoke with a smile on his face. "Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." Chapter 639. The Beiming clan of Tianyue Prefecture was the largest clan in the western region of Tianyue Prefecture. Their strength was on par with family Nangong. They didn't expect to see the Beiming clan here. For a moment, the expressions of the three members of family Nangong changed. At the same time, they were secretly ashamed. They had said that Xiao Chen was a coward, but it seemed like that wasn't the case at all. Could it be that young master Xiao Chen had already noticed something? One of the family Nangong experts whispered. "Perhaps. We've really underestimated young master Xiao Chen. Let's not talk about this for now. What should we do now? The Beiming clan is here. Things aren't going to be easy." They thought that they could easily destroy the Qingma gang, but the appearance of the Baiming clan had completely disrupted their plans. After a short moment of silence, the leader of family Nangong said coldly, "Does the kidnapping of the young miss have anything to do with your Baiming clan?" It was normal for family Nangong to guess that the Baiming clan had appeared here. Moreover, the family Nangong had already found it strange. The Qingma gang was just a small gang. Where did they get the courage to kidnap the young miss of the family Nangong? Now everything was clear. The Qingma gang was backed by the Baiming clan. It was also because of the Baiming clan's support that the Qingma gang dared to attack the Nangong Yen. The leader of the Baiming clan smiled faintly in the face of the family Nangong experts questioning. "Who knows? If that's the case, then don't blame family Nangong. The three of you will stay here today." The three members of family Nangong were furious when they heard the Baiming clan's answer. They immediately chose to attack. Although the appearance of the Baiming clan was very surprising, there was no turning back now. No matter what, they had to rescue the Nangong Yen today. The three Dao Emperor realm experts from the family Nangong were the first to attack, and the expressions of the three members of the Baiming clan didn't change at all when they saw this and directly moved forward to greet them. A world-shocking battle erupted between 6 Dao Emperors in the sky. The Qingma gang led by Zhao Chang naturally didn't have the qualifications to participate in a battle of such a level, and they didn't even have the qualifications to get close to it. After retreating far away, Zhao Chang and the others watched the battle in shock. As the battle between family Nangong and Baiming family Nangong broke out, the defense in the valley could be said to be extremely lax because all attention was on the three experts from family Nangong. Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao moved forward cautiously. Facing the guards of the Qingma gang, Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao easily dealt with them. With Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao's strength, it was extremely easy for them to deal with these ants from the Qingma gang. After silently dealing with another person, Xiao Chen turned to look outside the valley where the terrifying aftershocks of the battle were ceaselessly resounding. His expression was cold as he muttered in an indifferent voice, "The battle has already begun? Looks like I have to hurry." The battle between the experts from the family Nangong and Baiming clan had already erupted, so Xiao Chen had to speed up. He had to rescue the Nangong Yan's group before the battle ended. Otherwise, it would be impossible to rescue them under the noses of the three Dao Emperor realm experts from the Baiming clan once the battle ended. They only had one chance, so Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao couldn't help but speed up. They killed their way into the valley. When Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao arrived at the deepest part of the valley, they could see at a glance that there were dozens of caves dug into the mountain walls on both sides. These caves were probably the work of the Qingma gang, and their purpose was to temporarily house them. According to Xiao Chen's guess, the Nangong Yan's group should be locked up in one of these caves. 1, 2, 3. Xiao Chen silently counted the number of guards from the Qingma gang as he observed his surroundings. There were a total of 20 people, and they were all separated from each other. In other words, they would definitely be discovered as soon as they made a move. It was impossible for them to deal with these 20 people stealthily. As such, they could only forcefully finish them off before they could send out a signal and rescue the Nangong Yan's group as quickly as possible. Xiao Chen asked Gu Lingyao, who was beside him, in a soft voice, "Let's do it the hard way," Xiao Chen said to Gu Lingyao. "Lingyao, how many people can you take care of in 3 breaths?" Gu Lingyao asked Gu Lingyao how many people she could take care of. After hearing Xiao Chen's question, Gu Lingyao naturally knew what Gu Lingyao was thinking. 8 people. Gu Lingyao didn't dare to boast about taking care of these people before they could react. Xiao Chen replied without hesitation. "All right, the 7 on the left are yours. Remember, you must take care of them in 3 breaths. Leave the other 13 to me." Gu Lingyao nodded after hearing Xiao Chen's words. Then, Xiao Chen took a deep breath and shouted, "Do it." Following Xiao Chen's shout, 2 figures flashed out like lightning. Before the Qingma gang guards could react, the two figures had already begun their massacre. Xiao Chen flashed and came before the person closest to him. Without saying a word, he threw a punch right away. With a muffled boom, the person's head was blown apart by Xiao Chen's punch. Xiao Chen did not stop and continued to point with his fingers. Beams of golden sword aura flashed as he performed the Chun Jun finger sword. The golden sword light was very fast. At the same time, Xiao Chen's body didn't stop as he used the Chun Jun sword finger. He immediately flew towards another person. He had to be fast. At this moment, time was life. He couldn't let these guards sound the alarm. Otherwise, it would definitely alert Zhao Chong and the others outside the valley. It would be troublesome then. In less than 3 breaths of time, Xiao Chen had already finished off the 13 guards he was in charge of. When he turned around, he saw that Gu Lingyao had also finished off the last person. None of the 20 guards were spared. Moreover, they didn't alert Zhao Chong and the others outside. Xiao Chen secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he and Gu Lingyao began to search for the place where Nangong Yen and the others were imprisoned. There were more than 10 caves in total. Xiao Chen and Gu Lingyao split up and searched one cave after another. Finally, when Xiao Chen stepped into the entrance of a cave, a ray of golden light suddenly shot up into the sky. This golden light was a glyph array. However, it didn't have the slightest bit of offensive power. However, Xiao Chen's expression changed drastically. Oh no, this was a warning glyph array. As expected, when the golden light shot up into the sky, the expressions of the 3 experts from the Baiming family outside the valley changed. The leader of the 3 shouted angrily, "Damn it, someone has broken into the valley. Zhao Chong, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and bring people back. You must protect Nangong Yen and the others." Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 640. The Warning Talisman Formation was an extremely simple talisman formation. It didn't possess any offensive ability, and its only function was to act as a prison guard. Once someone entered the range of the Warning Talisman Formation, the talisman formation would automatically activate and erupt with a dazzling light. He never expected that there would actually be a warning talisman formation at the entrance of the cave. A wisp of a helpless and bitter smile appeared on his face as he said, "I really was careless. Alas, if only Lan Xiao was here. I definitely wouldn't have made such a low-level mistake." Xiao Chen felt extremely helpless after inadvertently activating the warning talisman formation. At the same time, he thought of the Heavenly Thunder-Proud King, Lan Xiao. As the only person amongst the Heavenly Thunder-Proud Kings who was proficient in talismans and talisman formations, this would definitely not have happened if Lan Xiao was with him. With Lan Xiao's attainments in talisman formations, it was simply too easy for him to see through and break through the warning talisman formation. He felt depressed in his heart, but now wasn't the time to talk about this. Right when the warning talisman formation shot into the sky, Zhao Chong led his group and charged into the valley. At the same time, the battle outside the valley didn't stop. The 3 members of the Baiming clan shouted coldly at the 3 members of the family Nangong. "Humph! Family Nangong, do you think you can let the Nangong Yen go just like that? You've underestimated us." They naturally thought that all of this was done by the family Nangong. Obviously, the 3 Dao Emperor Realm experts had attracted the attention of the Baiming clan before sending people to secretly sneak into the valley to rescue the Nangong Yen and the others. The 3 members of the family Nangong had reacted a long time ago when they heard the furious shouts from the 3 members of the Baiming clan. So Xiao Chen had seized the opportunity to sneak into the valley to rescue them. The 3 Dao Emperor Realm experts of the family Nangong felt ashamed when they realized this. But in next to no time, they guessed that what Xiao Chen needed them to do the most right now was to keep the members of the Baiming clan busy. Only in this way would Xiao Chen be able to rescue them successfully. At the thought of this, the family Nangong trio's eyes flashed with determination. No matter what, they had to hold the three from the Biming family back. Following which, the family Nangong trio's attacks became even more ferocious, firmly holding back the Biming family trio. Regarding this, the Biming family trio were infuriated, but there was nothing they could do. Now, they could only rely on Zhao Chang and the others. They could only hope that Zhao Chang and the others could defend the Nangong Yen trio. The Dao Emperor realm experts from both sides didn't have the energy to interfere in other matters. In this way, the success of the rescue depended on Xiao Qin and the others. Ignoring the warning glyph formation, Xiao Qin quickly walked into the cave with Gu Lingyao. Since the warning glyph formation was not here, it was most likely the place where the Nangong Yen and the others were imprisoned. Sure enough, they walked all the way into the cave. At the end of the cave, there was a prison that was only a little over 10 square meters in size. The prison was divided into 2 cages by stone pillars. One of them imprisoned a young woman who was extremely heroic, while the other imprisoned 12 disciples of the Tianfeng Xingzong. When they saw Xiao Chun and Gu Lingyao walk over, the disciples of the Tianfeng Xingzong were immediately overjoyed, and they all called out, "Senior brother Xiao Chun." These people were all ordinary disciples of the Heavenly Wind Saint sect. Naturally, they knew about Xiao Chun, who was a famous figure. When faced with their pleasant surprise, Xiao Chun didn't say anything and directly shattered the cage with a punch before removing the restrictions on them. After rescuing the disciples of the Tianfeng Xingzong Yen, Xiao Chun turned around and walked to the other cage. "You're the Nangong Yen?" "That's right." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the Nangong Yen nodded in response. Immediately after, Xiao Chen blasted the cage open with a punch, and then he personally removed the restriction on Nangong Yan's body. Everyone was successfully rescued. At this time, the disciples of the Tianfeng Xingzong also told the Nangong Yen about Xiao Chen's identity. Miss Nangong, senior brother Xiao Chen, is the first core disciple of the Tianfeng Xingzong. The 12 disciples naturally didn't know that Xiao Chen was no longer the first core disciple, but the 10th direct disciple. When Xiao Chen was promoted to direct disciple, they weren't in the sect. Seeing that no one knew that he was promoted to direct disciple, Xiao Chen didn't want to say anything about it. Now was not the time to relax. The warning glyph array had already been activated, and the people of the Qingma gang were definitely on their way here. Now that things had come to this, it was impossible to sneak away without anyone noticing. Seeing that the disciples were relieved, Xiao Chen said calmly, "Now is not the time to be happy. The warning glyph array at the cave entrance has already been activated. I believe that the people of the Qingma gang will be here soon." Then what should we do?" Hearing this, the disciples of the Tianfeng Xingzong all looked at Xiao Chen. At this moment, Xiao Chen was their only hope. Facing everyone's gazes, Xiao Chen said indifferently, "There's nothing we can do. We can only force our way through." Now that things had come to this, they could only force their way through. However, Nangong Yen hesitated for a moment before saying, "I'm afraid that won't work. There are still people from the Biming clan in the valley. They are all at the Dao Emperor realm. We won't be able to break through with our strength." Xiao Chen didn't expect the Nangong Yen to know that the people of the Biming clan were here. He smiled and said, "Miss Nangong, if you're talking about the 3 mysterious Dao Emperors, then there's no need to worry. The 3 of them are currently being held back by the experts of your family Nangong. As long as we can break through the Qingma gang's encirclement, we'll be able to escape." The experts of the family Nangong had already held back the people of the Biming clan. Hearing this, the Nangong Yan's eyes lit up, and her confidence increased greatly. "Then there's a chance." The Nangong Yen was overjoyed and said with a smile, "Without the experts of the Biming clan, they only needed to deal with the Qingma gang. They still had a fighting chance." Then, under Xiao Chen's lead, the group walked out of the cave with large strides. As expected, Zhao Chang and his men had already arrived outside the cave. Over 100 members of the Qingma gang surrounded the cave tightly. When they saw Xiao Chen and the others striding out, Zhao Chong laughed loudly. Haha, Miss Nangong, where do you plan to go? It's not time yet. I'm afraid you'll have to stay here for a few more days. Humph. The Nangong Yen snorted coldly when she heard Zhao Chong's words. She clenched her fists tightly and her eyes looked as though they were about to spit fire. Seeing the look on the Nangong Yan's face, Xiao Chen was even more certain of his conjecture. The kidnapping of the Nangong Yen was definitely arranged by that person from the Tianyue sacred sect. Moreover, the reason why that person kidnapped the Nangong Yen, based on the current situation, was probably to stall for time. In order to allow the Nangong Yen to stay here, that person kidnapped her. However, what was that person from the Tianyue sacred sect trying to do? Why was he afraid of the Nangong Yen? This thought flashed through his mind. Things were getting more and more interesting. However, now was not the time to think about this. Suppressing his curiosity, Xiao Chen's gaze fell on Zhao Chong. If he could defeat him, everyone could escape. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.